Chapter 10:26. The drunkard left, but the eldest brother didn't. He walked to the front of the carriage and laid Lu Yiqing's body flat on the ground. Then, he turned to look at the ruins of the imperial city in the darkness. He listened to the sound of the wind rustling the river. He was silent, as if he was waiting for something to happen. His expression was slightly sad and helpless. Longqing knew what he was waiting for, so he was even more puzzled about why he didn't leave with him. He looked at his cotton-padded jacket and the dust on it, and his expression gradually turned solemn. Among the three who stayed, Hamu was the youngest and the proudest. He suffered the biggest setback tonight, so he looked a little lonely and furious. It was not until this moment that he realized that the academy had been targeting the drunkard from the very beginning. He had never been in their eyes. He clenched his fists slowly and thought to the eldest brother, "Even if you have entered the legendary distanceless state, do you think you could defeat me easily? Do you know what state I am in now?" Longqing sensed the change of Hengmu's mood and looked even more solemn. He looked at the eldest brother with vigilance and slowly walked to Hengmu's side, ready to attack at any time. During the period after spring, the divine halls of West Hill and the academy had been strangely peaceful. Before tonight, both sides knew that they were safe. As long as no one attacked first, the balance would not be broken. It was a balance between the two grand cultivators in the distanceless state. Tonight, the balance was finally broken. Looking back at the battles that happened in front of the ruins of the imperial city, it was still unclear who attacked first. Even though it was the divine halls of West Hill's plan, the distanceless one was the drunkard who felt the real danger. The academy almost injured or even killed him. Longqing was vigilant. The balance had been broken. The eldest brother didn't leave with the drunkard, which meant that he and Hengmu would probably attack him and Hengmu. Could they survive? When the drunkard was still hiding in the darkness, he asked the eldest brother if it was worth it to exchange their lives. It meant that the eldest brother believed that he and Hengmu were capable of doing something. Hengmu's confidence came from his faith. But where did his confidence come from? "You are very different from the rumors." The faint starlight fell on Longqing's body, like a stream flowing into dry sand, and was instantly swallowed up. Looking at this scene, the eldest brother was puzzled and said, "If you can gain the power of darkness by betraying your faith in Hao Yan, who gave you this power? I don't think even the Abbey Dean can explain it." Longqing was very clear that no matter how famous he was in the cultivation world, he was not qualified to be remembered by Mr. First of the Academy. The so-called rumor was probably something Ning Ke had mentioned in a casual conversation. He knew that the Abbey Dean had seen through his state. But as the Abbey Dean had said, if even the Abbey Dean could not explain it and he could not understand it, then no one could. "Why are you talking nonsense?" Hengmu said. The eldest brother looked at the lad in indigo and said, "The West Hill Divine Palace values beauty, but the real Haotian Taoism values indigo. The Abbey Dean has been wearing indigo all these years. Yi Hongyu also wore indigo when she was comprehending swordsmanship in the stone house by the cliff. Youngest brother also wore indigo when he fought his way up to the Peach Mountain. It's ridiculous for you to wear indigo at your current state." Hengmu was very angry. He laughed even more innocently and said, "Let's not compare with the Abbey Dean, but to say that the judge and Ning Ke are more qualified than me to wear this indigo robe, Mr. First Taste, is really ridiculous." The eldest brother looked at him and said calmly, "Is passing that threshold the source of your confidence?" Hengmu was shocked when he heard that. He did not expect that the eldest brother could see through his real state that he had been hiding. He said indifferently, "Since you have seen through it, why shouldn't I be confident?" The eldest brother looked at him and said, "As the youngest cultivator in history to pass that threshold, you should be proud and confident no matter how you look at it. But it's a pity that you did not pass that threshold by yourself. You were carried over by Hao Yan, so you're still a baby now." Longqing suddenly said, "I don't understand why Mr. First said this now, because I don't understand why he dared to leave." Suddenly, the eldest brother showed an expression of understanding. He sighed and said, "Light and darkness are the two sides of Hao Yan. How stupid I am to only understand this now." Long Qing said, Mr. First is wise. The eldest brother said, if Hung Mu had your current state of mind, it would be more troublesome. Long Qing said, if that's the case, you shouldn't wait now. You should take action. The eldest brother looked a little lost and said, can I bear the price of taking action? Long Qing said, you know what he's going to do. The eldest brother nodded and said, yes. Long Qing said, since you are hesitating whether to take action, you should at least follow him. The eldest brother said, even if I follow him, I can't stop him. I can only be a passerby. That will be more painful. Long Qing said, isn't waiting here and guessing what is happening in the distance the most painful? The eldest brother said after a moment of silence, what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. It's always better if you can't see. Youngest uncle said that a gentleman should stay away from the kitchen. That's probably the reason. Hypocrite. Hung Mu scolded bluntly. The academy is a bunch of hypocrites. The eldest brother said, maybe, I'm indeed a hypocrite, but I can't represent the academy. If it were June Mo or third sister here tonight, they wouldn't say as much as I do. Hung Mu stopped talking because he found that it was hard to treat a hypocrite as a hypocrite, and it was hard to have any malice towards him. It was quiet in front of the ruins of the imperial city. The night wind blew the river gently, and the willow branches came to the scene. They floated over Lu Yiqing's blood-stained face and closed eyes, and then disappeared. Just like the passage of time, there was no trace. As Long Qing said, waiting was the most torturous thing. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait for too long. The drunkard came back. The flagon was swinging on his waist. Some blood stains could be seen on the hem of his robe. The eldest brother's face turned pale. He knew that the drunkard purposely let the blood stain his robe for him to see, but he still couldn't help blaming himself and suffering. The drunkard untied the flagon and said, it's only a moment, but I'm still drunk. He took a sip of wine and squinted his eyes. The eldest brother was silent for a long time, and then he asked, who died? The drunkard left to kill people. There were few people in the world that he couldn't kill. The one who died was also a good drinker. The drunkard recalled the scene when he killed people and said with emotion, I went to Chuzhou before. The eldest brother said, Chuzhou of the Tang Empire? The drunkard said, yes. Chuzhou is surrounded by mountains, and there's a pavilion on the East Mountain. The pavilion was built by a governor. The eldest brother said with a trembling voice, the governor of Chuzhou was honest and loved the people. The drunkard said, he was as honest as water and loved the people as his own children. The eldest brother said, he was a true sage. The drunkard said, a sage loved wine. He was indeed a sage. The eldest brother said, but you killed him. The drunkard said, if the governor of Chuzhou was not a sage, I wouldn't have killed him. The eldest brother asked with a trembling voice, why? The drunkard looked at him and said calmly, because the more virtuous the person died, the more pain you will feel. Chapter 10:27. The governor of Chuzhou was a wise man, but judging from his dark cheeks and rough hands, he was probably just an ordinary farmer. It was hard to distinguish a wise man from a foolish one by his appearance. He had just returned from the river bank and was ready to welcome the invasion of Chiuxia. He was inevitably anxious. But what really worried him was the coming enemy. Chuzhou was beautiful, but it was at the border. His emotions were the same as those of a wise man. They did not show on his face at all. He calmly dealt with the government affairs and walked out of the government office accompanied by a boy. He held his staff and climbed East Mountain, hoping to find some peace. There was a newly built pavilion in East Mountain. It was built by him and cost a lot of money. It was a difficult time for the nation, which naturally brought him some criticism. But he did not seem to care. The earthen jar was gently broken. The fragrance of the wine gradually permeated the air. The prefect was drinking under the pavilion, looking at the bright moon in the night sky, looking at how beautiful the rivers and mountains were under the moonlight. He was very satisfied. His poetic mood gradually rose, and he wanted to write another essay. Right at this moment, a cool breeze came from the south, countless miles away, crossing over the mountains and ridges and the grass and pine trees. It circled around the pavilion 3 times before entering and lingering for a moment before leaving. The governor was dead. He had died quietly just like that. He did not have time to recite the poem or write the travel that would be fascinating for thousands of years. He did not leave any paper or ink or say anything to the people of Chuzhou. He died just like that. In front of the quiet imperial city ruins in Lincoln, the eldest brother looked at the direction of Chuzhou and kept silent for a long time. He asked with a pale face, "What good will it do for you to make me and the Tangs suffer? Because I'm very afraid of death. The longer I live, the more afraid I am." The drunkard looked into his eyes and said, "When I felt the danger, I was really scared. I've never been so close to death for so many years. It was really terrifying. I have lived for so long that I am really unfamiliar with this feeling. Tonight, when I relived it, I found that the great fear was still there and it was getting stronger and stronger. It was so strong that I cannot bear it. So I am very angry." His face was expressionless, like a hardened field that had been cultivated for countless years until it was seriously short of nutrients. His body was still filled with the aroma of wine. His anger was not shown in detail, but it was clearly shown in the human world, because far away from Chuzhou, the governor who loved to drink was dead. I don't want to experience this feeling again. I don't want to be the target of the academy. So I have to make you suffer, the Tangs suffer, and the academy suffer. I have to be so scared that I can't move." The drunkard was still staring at him. There was no emotion in his eyes, only indifference and power. "I can kill people, countless Tangs. As long as I have the thought, you can't stop me no matter how fast you are. It doesn't take much effort to kill ordinary people. Ninkei can't see me, so he can't stop me. You can only watch me kill people and be tortured until you collapse." The eldest brother's body trembled slightly. He clenched his fists tightly, as if he was already in pain. The drunkard continued, "More than 10, more than 100, tens of millions of people will die. So unless you are sure that you can kill me, the academy should not try to kill me again. Even if you don't want to kill me. Don't want to kill me, even if it's thinner than a willow branch or lighter than a catkin." The eldest brother lowered his head and did not speak for a long time. The willow tree on the moat was silent with him. The willow branches brushed the surface of the moat and drove the pieces of cloth far away. The willow catkin would arrive in spring next year. He could not wait until next year. The academy and the Tang Empire could not wait until next year. So what should he do? Suddenly, he looked up at the bright moon in the night sky and said, "I can also kill people, right?" Then he looked at the drunkard and said solemnly and firmly, "When I want to kill, no one can stop me, not even you. So please don't force me." The drunkard remained calm and said, "Please." The eldest brother raised his eyebrows. The drunkard said, "Please kill." The eldest brother frowned. The drunkard said, "Please kill." The eldest brother knitted his eyebrows, pondered, and hesitated, for he was about to leave and kill people in the next moment. In the Song Dynasty, Qi Dynasty, Liang Dynasty, and Chen Dynasty, countless Taoists are waiting for you to kill. Billions of followers are waiting for you to kill. On the grassland, countless barbarians are waiting for you to kill. You can kill whoever you want. The drunkard looked at his eyebrows that were smoothed by the night wind and said, "If you can enter the Peach Mountain, you can kill more people you want to kill. But who are you going to kill? Who should be killed by you?" To kill or not to kill was a problem. So is who to kill? In the mortal world, among the peach blossoms on the mountain, who was the most evil? Who should be killed? Who could judge? Who was qualified to judge? It was difficult to answer these questions. Some people didn't want to answer because they thought everyone in the mortal world deserved to die, such as Lotus. Some people didn't want to think because they thought they were half gods in the mortal world, such as the drunkard. But for the eldest brother, it was a question he had to answer. He stood under the willow branches by the river and in front of the blood-stained sedan, thinking for a long time. Liu Yiqing on the sedan quietly closed his eyes as if he was sleeping. The cultivators and ministers by the river were all unconscious. Only the drunkard, Longqing, and Hengmu were waiting for his decision. looking at the cotton-padded jacket swaying in a night wind and the dust that accumulated for thousands of miles gradually falling. Long Qing felt uneasy and uneasy. He also had an inexplicable expectation. If the cotton-padded jacket really moved and Mr. First left to kill people, then the world would become a brand new one that no one had ever seen before. In that world, all the order would collapse because the most basic order of life and death would be broken. Two grand cultivators in the limitless state would keep killing people, and no one would know who would die in the next moment. Only one of them could shake the order of the world. Two of them could destroy the world. Hamu looked at the drunkard and the eldest brother and finally understood why the limitless state was the most special one above the 5 states. It even became a synonym for that world. The night grew darker and the river quieted down until it became deathly silent. The human world seemed to be waiting for the moment of deathly silence. After a long time, the dawn finally came. The eldest brother stood in front of the sedan and never left. People gradually woke up. They didn't dare to stay by the river and soon left. The bright moon also left. The warm red morning sun appeared in the sky, illuminating the burnt ruins and new houses in the city of Lincoln. No one can stop you, but you can. The drunkard looked at him and said, "You still don't dare to kill people after all." "It's not that I don't dare to. I just can't bear to." The eldest brother had figured it out and said, "Everyone has a heart that can't bear to kill people. You regard yourself as a god, so you are not a human. That's why you can kill people. But I can't because I'm still a human." Chapter 1028. Experience could change one's temperament, and one's level determined one's height. Cultivators were different from ordinary people. Since ancient times, those grand cultivators who had surpassed the 5 states were able to control the wind and rain, shake the heaven and earth, and overlook the common people. Naturally, their spiritual world gradually drifted away from the mortal world and headed towards the inhuman realm. It was easy to understand. Even the headmaster of the academy failed to avoid this mental journey. Later on, he and Ning Ke had a change of heart. The method he used to find his original heart was unimaginable. The eldest brother was the fastest person in the world, but his name was Li Man Man because he did everything slowly. Even puberty and the confusion period after becoming a grand cultivator came much later than others. But no matter how slow it came, it would come eventually. He once thought about it and had his own opinion or choice. At this moment, he said that the drunkard was inhuman, not because he was praising the drunkard's state, but because he was implicitly criticizing him. A gentle person like him actually criticized the drunkard, which meant that he was extremely angry, no matter how calm he looked. He was angry that the drunkard killed people, sages, for no reason, and would probably kill more people. It was hard for him to understand and accept. Hamu mocked, hypocritical indeed. The so-called cultivation, no matter entering or leaving the human world, aiming for immortality or nirvana, was essentially the opposite of ordinary people. He once said that the academy was hypocritical, and now he could not help but ridicule the eldest brother again when he said that everyone had a heart that could not bear to kill others and insisted on putting himself in the category of ordinary people. The eldest brother recalled the conversation at the back of the mountain of the academy and said, "The second brother and the youngest brother both criticized me in the past. The youngest brother was more subtle, while Junimo was more direct. Although the third sister never said anything, I know that she has always looked down on my way of doing things. It is indeed hypocritical. Since I can kill people, I should kill them. If I don't, it means that I am pushing the responsibility to others. Besides, I can always find some people who should be killed." He gradually calmed down and said to the drunkard, "The water is muddy. I can wash clothes and feet with it. But the Sisui River is already red. I can't always walk by the river without getting my shoes wet." The calm words hid some kind of determination, which indicated a great danger for Taoism. Long Qing, who had been silently listening, slightly narrowed his eyes and became serious. "It's useless even if you start killing now." The drunkard looked indifferent and said, "Hao Ian loves the world, but I am not Hao Ian." You love the world, but I am not you. You will suffer when I kill, but what can you do to me when you kill? Eldest brother asked, Is there no one or thing in this world that you care about? I've lived for countless years. All my relatives and friends are dead, and all my old friends are gone. Now I'm old, sick, and lonely. I have no love or hate in this world. No matter how you kill me, how can I be moved? The drunkard looked indifferent, but his words were full of vicissitudes. The other three were silent. At this moment, a light rain fell. The rain washed away the dust on the ground, softened the willow leaves by the river, and wet the hair. It brought a cold autumn feeling to the world. In the autumn rain, the eldest brother looked at the drunkard and said, So, I will definitely lose? The drunkard said, You fear what you love. You have to lose. Long Qing and Hung Mu left the imperial city in the rain. They led 2,000 papal cavalrymen of the divine halls of West Hill toward the great swamp and the kingdom of Song. In the bleak, misty rain, millions of people would die. The autumn rain was getting heavier and heavier. The eldest brother stood in front of the sedan and Lu Yiqing's body with his head lowered. The rain had wet his hair and drooped on his forehead, making him look a bit miserable. The world was flat, but the rain could not be completely uniform. Otherwise, there would not be disasters and floods in the human world. However, the autumn rain strangely covered most of the mountains, rivers, and cities. Fortunately, the rain was not heavy. It was not as frightening as the year when the headmaster of academy ascended to heaven, but more like the spring rain that wet people's hearts. It was also raining in Chuzhou. The eaves of the pavilion on the east mountain were wet. People's clothes were also wet. 2 old servants knelt in front of the governor's body and cried. The officials and gentry who came from the city in the early morning were pale and shocked. No one noticed what a man who looked like an advisor was doing on the pillar of the pavilion. Although the scenery on the East Mountain was beautiful, it was too high for tourists. No one understood why the governor, who was known for his honesty and love for the people, would mobilize people to spend money to build such a pavilion on the top of the mountain at such a critical time. No one knew that the pavilion, which had brought the governor a rare negative comment, was actually a transmission array that could send some simple important information to Chang'an. Such a transmission array cost a lot of money. Even with the rich resources of the Tang Empire, it could only build a few of them, one in Helan City and one in Tiang City. Chuzhou was facing the Yin Kingdom and the Song Kingdom, and its strategic position was getting more and more important. That was why the imperial court spent a lot of money and asked the governor to build the pavilion despite his bad reputation. In the eyes of the officials and people of Chuzhou, the man who walked into the East Mountain Pavilion was the advisor of the governor. But in fact, he was a secret guard of the imperial palace. His task was to activate the pavilion. The East Mountain Pavilion sent the first piece of information to Chang'an. It was not about the invasion of the Yin Kingdom and the Song Kingdom, nor the collapse of the riverbank. It was a letter of death. The person who built the pavilion was dead. It was also raining in Chang'an. The rainwater flowed along the bright yellow eaves of the palace and washed the chrysanthemums in the imperial garden. The chrysanthemums in the imperial garden looked even more beautiful and beautiful. The yellow flowers overlapped each other and were extremely pleasing to the eye. In the imperial study, Liu heard the news of the governor's death from the small building and was silent for a long time. She looked at the chrysanthemums outside the window and was silent for a long time. Zheng Jing looked at her slightly pale side profile and suppressed his shock and anger. He said in a hoarse voice, "The imperial court must respond, or there will be chaos. An empire, an imperial court, or a territory. What maintained these terms could be spirit, courage, or historical inheritance. However, what was truly important was the administrative organization. In other words, the various levels of officials were the most important. No matter how perfect the system was, it still needed people to carry out the specific management. When the officials could die at any time, when the officials found that they could die at any time, the management system of the empire would be on the verge of collapse and irreversibly. The governor of Chuzhou was dead. The imperial court must respond. They could find and kill the murderer, hide the truth, or stop the enemy. Since the truth could not be hidden, there were only two other choices. There were only 2 or 3 people in the world who could go deep into the country, ignore the Imperial Center administration and the Academy, and silently kill the governor of Chuzhou. No matter who they were, the Imperial Court of the Tang Empire could not deal with them, even if the Tang Empire was the most powerful country in the world, because those people were beyond the scope of the secular world. Li was very clear about this. She looked at the chrysanthemums outside the window and said, "Let the Academy handle it. Kill that person or find a way to stop him. But, Ninkei, you still have to kill that person. Otherwise, how can Mr. Ouyang rest in peace?" Ninkei was eating noodles on the city wall when he got the news of the governor's death. In the past dozens of days, he had been living on the city wall because he had to look down on the human world and wait for the right time. He did not know the governor of Chuzhou, but he had heard of his virtuous name. He felt a little sad and then fell silent. Last night, when he aimed the iron bow at Lincoln and waited for the drunkard to show up, he knew that the drunkard would definitely fight back if his and his senior brother's plan did not work. But he did not expect it to come so soon. The drunkard and the butcher were special in the history of cultivation. They were accompanied by time, and their state was unfathomable. They had already transcended the mortal world. If possible, the Academy did not want to be enemies with them. But now that they had surrendered to Hao Ian, they became the enemies that the Academy wanted to kill the most. The Academy had been preparing to deal with the drunkard and the butcher since a long time ago, but they had never come up with a practical way. The arrangements made in advance were also filled with a sense of uneasiness. Therefore, while Ning Kei kept complaining that his headmaster was extremely irresponsible for not killing the drunkard and the butcher before he left the human world, he did not give up any chance to directly shoot the 2 powerhouses into idiots. It was a pity that he missed the chance. Therefore, he was very likely to become an idiot now. If he knew that it was because of Long Qing, he might have more feelings of karma. "I'm going down," Ning Kei said. Dozens of Tang soldiers had been taking care of his daily life on the city wall. Those who were busy in the temporary kitchen were the imperial chefs of the palace. People knew that he had not left the city wall for days. They were surprised to hear that he was going to leave. It was not a trip. He could leave as he wished. Ning Kei walked down the city wall and walked on the bluestone ground that was wet by the autumn rain. In autumn, the leaves on both sides of the Vermilion Bird Avenue were quickly dyed red and yellow. After the morning rain, countless leaves fell from the branches and piled up like colorful waves on the street, almost knee-deep. In a short time, the drunkard would not give him another chance. The powerhouses of the West Hill Divine Palace would also become very cautious. Moreover, they would not dare to enter Chang'an. Therefore, it was meaningless for him to stay on the city wall. Now the problem he had to solve was how to stop the drunkard from killing. If he allowed the drunkard to continue killing, the Tang Empire would be overturned before the armies of the West Hill Divine Palace and the Golden Tribe Royal Court came. The drunkard did not do this before because he was afraid of the Academy and the headmaster of the Academy. Also, although he yearned for the Divine Kingdom, he did not want to destroy the human world. Now that he was going crazy, how should the Academy deal with it? If the headmaster of the Academy and the youngest uncle were still alive, it would be easy. They could just kill the drunkard with a rod or a sword, and then kill the butcher. Unfortunately, they were gone. The eldest brother could not stop the drunkard because he was not that kind of person. The second brother could not either. The 2 of them would only fight the drunkard with their lives, just like what they did in the Xiankong Temple. When it was not necessary, Ning Kei looked down on this method, because he always thought that his life and the lives of his senior brothers and sisters in the Academy were more important than the lives of others. No matter if one was the drunkard or the butcher, the chief monk or the abbey dean, they were not qualified to exchange their lives. Therefore, he disagreed with Chao Xiaoshu's arrangement and did not consider what his 2 senior brothers would do. If the third sister were in Chang, and what would he do? If Lotus were still alive, what would he do? Ning Kei walked among the yellow and red leaves and breathed in the fresh air in the autumn rain. His mind became very clear, and he knew what he should do. It's rare to see 3,000 words. That's an improvement. I hope I can keep it. Chapter 1029. When Ning Ke found Shangguan Yangyu, the new nobleman of the Tang Empire was drinking in the House of Red Sleeves. His distinctive triangular eyes looked more wretched because of the blurriness. His goatee, which was soaked in wine, was like an ink brush swinging on the table, which was funny and even disgusting. Logically speaking, the current situation of the Tang Empire was extremely serious. The imperial study in the palace was lit day and night, and all the departments were extremely busy. He really couldn't understand why Shangguan Yangyu was here, but he didn't bother to ask because he was pressed for time. When Shangguan Yangyu saw him, he sobered up and felt his stomach was heavy. He wanted to go to the toilet to solve the problem, but he didn't dare to leave. He asked, "What's the matter, Mr. 13? Ning Ke said, "I want to kill some people." He said it casually, but in Shangguan's ears, it was like a clap of thunder. The remaining tipsy feeling was immediately dispelled, and his lower abdomen twitched. He shivered, as if he had already gone to the toilet. The reason why he reacted so strongly was that Shangguan knew very well that if Ning Ke said to kill people, he would kill them. And the people he killed would not be ordinary people, nor would he just kill them. Since many years ago, Ning Ke had started killing people in Chang'an City. He had committed many murders and killed many officials of the imperial court. It was also from then on that Shangguan began to contact him. He pretended that he didn't see anything, but in the end, he had to be loyal to Ning Ke from body to soul. If Ning Ke hadn't killed the censor Lu Yiqi, he wouldn't have been able to become the prefectural magistrate of Chang'an City. In a sense, he was the first spectator of Ning Ke's killing and the first beneficiary. He had never forgotten those bloody memories. However, Ning Ke was now the most important bigwig in the Tang Empire. His words were more powerful than the emperor's. No matter who he wanted to kill, no one dared to oppose him. So why did he come to him? Shangguan Yangyu couldn't understand, and his expression became more humble. Ning Ke knew what he was thinking, but he didn't explain. He looked at him with interest and said, "You don't want to help me? What are you talking about?" Shangguan Yangyu looked determined. Seeing that no one in the building was paying attention to them, he lowered his voice and said firmly, "Even if you want to kill your way into the palace, I will follow you." Ning Ke was satisfied with his attitude and led him out of the House of Red Sleeves. Shangguan Yangyu did not dare to say anything. He grabbed the front of his robe and followed him into the puddles on the street. Perhaps it was because of the cold autumn rain, his face looked a little pale. His performance in that war was outstanding, and he had been promoted many times. He was already a grand secretary and ranked at least among the top 5 in the imperial court. But he was very clear that the fundamental reason why he could have his current position was that Ning Ke and the academy trusted him. So no matter what the academy decided to do, no matter who Ning Ke wanted to kill, he had to follow. After all, he was not Xingjing, the Grand Secretary, who could scold Ning Ke badly without worrying about his position in the imperial court or being killed by the academy. It was all because he did not have a good daughter. But who did Ning Ke want to kill? He wouldn't really kill another emperor of Tang, would he? The autumn rain was pattering and the long street was already wet. The sound of wheels rolling on the flagstones gradually stopped. Shangguan Yangyu lifted the curtain and found that he did not enter the palace, so he felt a little relieved. The place Ning Ke brought him to was a large, inconspicuous house. There was no sound in the whole house, and it looked a little gloomy in the misty rain. Shangguan Yangyu knew what this house was for and felt more and more confused. He thought that if the person Ning Ke wanted to kill lived here, he could just kill him. Why did Ning Ke bring him along? Walking in the main hall of the house, Ning Ke sat on the armchair and took the hot tea from the official of the Ministry of Penalty. He gently pulled the lid off and looked at him and said, "The money and grain counselors from the Ministry of Revenue will be here soon." After saying this, he looked at the corridor outside the hall that was wet by the autumn rain and sensed the looming chi of heaven and earth lock in the air. He said, "Time is a little tight, so we have to hurry." When the whole world attacked the Tang Empire, Li Huiyuan took the opportunity to usurp the throne. He Mingxi was in charge of the Imperial Center Administration and the Southern Gate Temple and caused chaos. No one knew how much blood was shed in Chang, and during those nights. After Ning Ke and the Empress returned to Chong and stabilized the situation, the next thing they did was to suppress and purge. The cultivators who participated in the rebellion in the Imperial Center Administration and the Southern Gate Temple were either killed or captured. Now they were imprisoned in this large house. The tactical array here could not trap the powerhouses of the knowing destiny state, but it was enough to turn them into ordinary people. Killing these people is not a big deal. Shangguan Yangyu did not finish his sentence. There are many people to kill. Ning Ke said, besides the people here, there are many more people to kill. How can I kill so many people alone? I need the imperial court to do it. Shangguan Yangyu said with a sad expression, although I used to be a judicial military advisor in the Chong and local government, I never supervised executions. Isn't it more convenient for the Ministry of Penalty to do this? I can judge whether they are dead or alive. It's not a matter of supervising executions. Ning Ke said, as I said, there are too many people to kill today. There can't be any mistakes. The Ministry of Revenue, which is in charge of you, is best at counting the number. Thinking of what Ning Ke said before, the grain advisors of the Ministry of Revenue were coming here, Shangguan Yangyu was extremely shocked. His body stiffened and he thought, do I need the Ministry of Revenue to count the heads? How many people are they going to kill? You should know about the governor of Chuzhou. Ning Ke stood up and walked to the railing. He looked at the curtain of rain and said, you are afraid, so you are fooling around in the House of Red Sleeves. The whole Tang Empire knew that Mr. Shangguan was greedy and immoral. The most admirable thing was that he did not abandon his wife or that he feared his wife like a tiger. It was strange that such a person was drinking in a brothel early in the morning. Listening to Ning Ke's words, Shangguan Yangyu was silent for a long time. Then he said tiredly, yes, I am indeed afraid. I don't want to die quietly. Ning Ke said, as long as you are in Chang'an, I can guarantee your life. Shangguan Yangyu looked at his back and said, what about outside the city? The Academy can't guarantee the lives of the officials of the Imperial Court. How can they not be afraid? Ning Ke turned to him and said, what you said makes sense. So I want to kill people today. I want to kill a lot of people. Only in this way can we hope that they won't dare to kill our people. Shangguan Yangyu's triangular eyes suddenly brightened. He knew what the Academy was going to do. But the next moment, his eyes dimmed again because this might not solve the problem. At this moment, the Yulin Royal Guards escorted more than 10 officials of the Ministry of Revenue to come in the wind and rain. These people were the best accounting experts. They could count everything correctly, including the number of people. So Ning Ke could start killing. Chapter 10:30. There were many prisoners kneeling in the yard. There were men and women, old and young. Their clothes were ragged and their faces were pale. It was obvious that they hadn't seen the sun for many years. They had long lost the courage or desire to continue living. Death was a relief for them. They knelt numbly without any intention of atonement. Therefore, the rain falling from the sky didn't add much solemnity to the scene. The officials from the Ministry of Revenue watched this scene and couldn't help but feel nervous. Their hands trembled slightly as they held their pens. The executioners waiting to the side appeared very calm. Their hands gripping the hilt of their knives were extremely steady. How do we kill them? Shangguan Yangyu stood behind Ning Ke and said in a low voice, all the cultivators who participated in the rebellion are here, except for those who died of illness or torture. Should we kill them all or select them? Ning Ke looked at the prisoners in the autumn rain and said, we may have to kill them a few times. Don't kill them all today. Shangguan Yangyu said, what's the standard? Their importance to the West Hill Divine Palace or the seriousness of the crimes they committed in the rebellion. These guys' hands are all stained with blood. Ning Ke said, since it's for the Divine Hall to see, we can kill them randomly. Shangguan Yangyu didn't understand and asked confusedly, randomly? Ning Ke waved his hand and said, it means randomly. The officials from the Ministry of Revenue looked at each other. Even the experienced killers who were holding their knives were a little stunned. Only Shangguan Yangyu didn't hesitate and waved his hand at the rain, indicating that he would kill half of them first. The blades cut through the rain and landed on the necks of the prisoners. They easily cut through their muddy skin and dry muscles, and cut through their bones, leaving behind a puddle of blood that was not bright red. With a snap, the heads fell on the ground like ripe fruits. They bounced twice in the puddles on the bluestone slabs and then quieted down. The gushing blood was quickly diluted by the rain. Seeing the death of their companions, the prisoners were finally awakened by the fear of death. Their numb nerves regained some vitality. Some of them tried to break free from the ropes and escape. Some of them cried in the rain in despair. Some of them looked at Ning K standing in the corridor with hatred in their eyes. The scene of killing was inevitably bloody. Ning K was not perverted enough to enjoy it, nor was he interested in making eye contact with those who were about to die. He turned around and walked back into the hall. Raising the teacup that was still warm and taking a sip, he once again raised his head to look out of the courtyard. He saw that more than a dozen corpses had fallen in the autumn rain, and the blood on the bluestone ground had become much thicker. Therefore, the most common colluders were often the family members of the traitor, which was understandable. After the outbreak of the war a few years ago, many Tangs returned from all over the world. Two-thirds of the Taoists in the South School of Haotian Taoism had cut off their ties with the West Hill Divine Palace. However, there were still devout Haotian believers who swore loyalty to the West Hill Divine Palace and refused to return. Some even served in the papal cavalrymen of the West Hill Divine Palace. These people were all traitors, and their family members were colluders. No matter whether they had cut off their ties with their family members in the West Hill or not, they would always be colluders, because the blood ties cannot be cut off. This was the most cold-blooded and cruel law of the Tang Empire. In the past few years, the Tang Empire had been searching everywhere and guarding the borders. They had captured thousands of people who were suspected of colluding with the enemy, and then imprisoned them in the prisons of Chang and in various counties. Other than upholding the law, the most important reason was naturally to deter and restrain those traitors who were far away from home. Today, Ning Ke was going to kill these people. This was something that no one could understand. Not only these family members could not understand, but the officials in the imperial court also could not understand. The alley on the side of the courtyard was filled with the smell of blood. The heads that had been chopped off previously were temporarily piled on the handcart waiting to be disposed of. Suddenly, a head rolled down and rolled in the rain all the way to the courtyard. It rolled in front of the family members, causing a burst of exclamations and cries. Ning Ke raised his head and looked at the men, women, old and young, kneeling in the autumn rain. It was as if he could see the gray wall opposite the old brush pen shop that had been wet by the spring rain many years ago, and he could see the dead darky. Looking at the head in the rain, he thought of the massacre that had happened in the general's mansion many years ago. He thought of the blood that overflowed through the crack of the door and the heads of acquaintances that looked like watermelons. That year, there was a spring rain in Chang'an. The imperial court and the divine hall were negotiating and preparing for peace. I led the Fish Dragon Gang and the Yulin Royal Guards into the guild hall of Qinghe County and killed everyone in Qinghe County in the rain. He said, "Now that I think about it, I kind of regret it." The officials looked slightly relieved and thought that the academy was kind. But then Ning Ke said, "At that time, we should have kept some and killed them slowly. Maybe we could have gotten more benefits." There was a dead silence in the courtyard. Only the sound of the rain and the children's uncontrollable cries could be heard. I know that you think you are innocent, and those people in Qinghe County probably feel the same. Even from the perspective of the Tang law or morality, some of you are really innocent. Ning Ke looked at the hundreds of people in the rain and said, "But I don't care." The officials in the courtyard and the Yulin Royal Guards were all Tangs. They cared about these things very much, so their faces were a little ugly. But Shangwan Yangyu did not care. He slowly raised his right hand in the autumn rain. He and Ning Ke were both atypical Tangs. The law of the Tang Empire was just a tool for them. As for those beautiful morals or feelings, they could just be appreciated and did not need to possess them. When he raised his hand, the knife fell. When the knife fell, the heads fell. The old cheeks, the young cheeks, and the childish cheeks instantly became extremely pale because of the loss of blood and being washed by the autumn rain. There was no breath of life left. With the screams of horror, the pitiful begging, the resentful cursing, and the sad crying, all kinds of heads kept falling in the rain. Hundreds of families of traders died in the autumn rain. The blade cut through flesh and blood, bringing death. The sound became more and more muffled. That was because the edge of the blade was curled. In the end, the sound of beheading turned into some kind of stick beating, like a broken drum being beaten continuously. It was muffled and horrible. The hands of the executioners finally trembled. The hands of the officials of the Ministry of Revenue were so fast that they could not hold their pens. The ink on the name list became bigger and bigger. It was difficult to draw a hook, but there was still no signal to stop. Shang Wanyanyu thought that he really did not care. However, when he saw the men, women, and children dying in the pool of blood and the heads piling up in the rain, he realized that his heart was not strong enough. He reached out to wipe off the drops of sweat or rain on his forehead. He looked at Ning Ke and asked in a trembling voice, "Is it enough?" Ning Ke said, "The Ministry of Revenue is best at counting money, grain, and heads. I asked you to do this because I want to know how many people should be killed. So you should answer my question." Shang Wanyanyu sighed and said, "I am just an ordinary person. I can't understand the state of mind of the grand cultivators. Most importantly, I don't know how much influence the divine hall has on that person. So, I don't know how many people should be killed. I even suspect that no matter how many people should be killed, it will not be enough." Ning Ke knew that Shang Wanyanyu's words made sense. But this was also the thing that he was most uncertain about. Could the joys and sorrows of the secular world really affect the drunkard? The cold rain made the wind cold, but it could not stop the pungent smell of blood from spreading in the courtyard. He looked at the thick blood that the rain could not wash away and said, "The autumn wind and rain make people sad." Even at this moment, Shang Wanyanyu did not forget to praise, "Good poem." Ning Ke said, Or do you want to do it?" Shang Wanyanyu said with a bitter smile, "I don't have the mood." Ning Ke reached out to catch the dripping rain on the eaves and said, "It's raining to beat the children. I have nothing to do anyway." Shang Wanyanyu said, "You are so carefree. I actually don't know how many people should be killed. But like I said, I have nothing to do anyway. These people should all die. Anyway, the imperial court needs to spend money to feed these idlers, so I might as well kill them. I kill people when I have nothing to do. The autumn wind and rain kill idlers. It makes sense to say that this is carefree." Ning Ke walked into the rain and turned to the officials and said, "Or you could try to kill more. The Ministry of Revenue is in charge of the food of the prisoners of war. You should know the number of people. How do you kill them?" Chapter 1031. The already quiet court suddenly became even more silent. No one answered Ning Ke's question. There was only a light clap. An official finally failed to hold his pen tightly, and it fell into the rainwater on the ground. In a human language, killing prisoners of war was a special phrase. It represented some of the bloodiest and cruelest scenes in history. With the passing of the barbaric era, those scenes became rarer and rarer. As for the Tang Empire, in the past several hundred years, except for Xiaohou, such a thing had never happened again. Even Shang Wanyanyu, who was famous for his shamelessness, was shocked speechless by Ning Ke's words. His pale face was full of absurdity and disapproval. The autumn rain fell, and the strange silence continued. The silence made people feel very nervous. Finally, it was Ning Ke who broke the silence. "Why so serious? Is it hard to answer? Then I'll decide." He looked at Shangwan and said, "Let the states kill 1/3 first and see how it goes." In the war a few years ago, the Tang army captured more than 30,000 prisoners of war. Some of them were released in the peace talks because of the exchange. Now there were still many prisoners of war imprisoned in the mine. 1/3 of the total number. The mine would be dyed red. How high would the bones in the mine be piled up? Killing prisoners is ominous. Heaven will be angry. "Mr. 13, please think twice," an official said in a hoarse voice. Now no one in the Tang court dared to question the Academy's opinion. let alone oppose it. But there were still people who would show their bravery on some things. Ninkei did not look at this brave official, but at the gloomy sky above the courtyard. There was no anger falling from the high sky, only continuous autumn rain. Killing prisoners is ominous, so heaven will be angry? What kind of sky is that? Is it the silent sky overlooking the spring and autumn of the human world? Or is it the impartial sky that secretly presides over the natural order? In short, it is Hao Ian. Then it is a joke. He smiled and shook his head. He did not say anything, nor did he take back the order. Shangguan Yangyu said bitterly, I'm worried that it can't be carried out. Killing prisoners was indeed in conflict with the Tang people's 3 views, and it was seriously not in line with the Tang people's aesthetic taste. This was his worry or excuse. Ning Kei said, why can't it be carried out? Shangguan Yangyu said, something needs to be done. I'm afraid no one is willing to do it. Ning Kei smiled and said, if no one is willing to do it, why don't you do it? Shangguan Yangyu was the Grand Secretary of the Imperial Court and had the full support of the Academy and the royal family. If he came forward and pushed for it, it would be possible to kill the prisoners no matter how difficult it was. But how long would he have to bear the bad reputation? He sighed and said, no wonder you insisted on bringing me with you today. Ning Kei said, there are not many people who can do it well, and even fewer who have the courage to do it. You are the only one who dares to do it with a good heart and a bad reputation. Shangguan Yangyu said with a bitter smile, I can't say I'm in a good mood. That's too abnormal. Ning Kei frowned and said, why do I feel that you are scolding me? Shangguan Yangyu sighed, don't just dig the pit. You have to put something at the bottom of the pit, right? Ning Kei said, if the Academy can continue to exist, your family will be safe for 10 generations. Shangguan Yangyu's eyes brightened. He thought for a while and said, then do it. He was a Grand Secretary, so he would not personally chop the heads of the prisoners. After giving the order, he asked Ning Kei, piling up heads or bones? There were always 2 extremes in killing prisoners. One was to be extremely secretive, so as not to let the enemy know and to avoid being recorded in the history books. The other was to be extremely arrogant and deliberately let the enemy know. As for what would be recorded in the history books, they could only ignore it for the time being. He and Ning Kei had previously discussed that the Tang Empire was killing people to show the West Hill Divine Palace. They wanted to kill until Hao Hian Taoism felt the pain. So it was not enough to just kill people. They had to let the enemy see it and let the whole world know. Only in this way could they confirm the Tang Empire's determination to kill people and feel fear. So, of course, they should choose the latter. How should they show the hundreds of cultivators and the families of the traitors who were killed and the thousands of prisoners who would die in the next few days to the world? We are not those primitive people on the grassland. Besides, how can we pile up so many heads? Where should I pile them? On the Vermilion Bird Avenue or under the Wanyan Tower? What if some heads roll down and scare the children? Ning Kei looked at him and criticized. It's too bloody. It's too cruel. Shangguan Yangyu felt very innocent, but thinking that many innocent people had become dead today, he decided not to make any excuses and just listen humbly. I know what you mean. Just like what I heard before, justice must not only be achieved, but it must also be seen. The same goes for killing people. We should find a way to let people see it, let the Divine Hall see it, but there is no need to scare our own people. There are always other ways. Ning Kei looked at the man in the chair next to him and said, I think the Divine Hall will see it very clearly and will not misunderstand what we mean. Don't you think so? The courtyard was the place to kill people, and the stone steps was the place to watch people kill people. No one knew when 2 armchairs had appeared there. In addition to Ning Kei, there was also a white-haired man. His hair was white, but he did not look old. Fatigue was written all over his face. He was Chung Li Shue, the Grand Master of the Revelation Department of the West Hill Divine Palace. Hearing Ning Kei's question, Chung Li Shue said after a moment of silence, the Divine Hall will see it very clearly. But I am curious. Do you know what you are doing? He was stationed in Chang, by the West Hill Divine Palace, and was in charge of all affairs. It seemed that he was in a high position, but in fact, Everyone knew that he had lost his power and was exiled to the most dangerous place, the ghost region. Ning Ke said, "You should know what I am doing, so there is no reason for me not to know. But I do need your opinion on whether it will work or not." Cheng Lishue said, "I am from the West Hill Divine Palace." Ning Ke looked at the autumn rain in the courtyard and said, "The great divine priest is dead. The great divine priest was robbed by the fishermen from the South Sea. You're also kicked out of Peach Mountain, so you're no longer a member of the West Hill Divine Palace." Cheng Lishue smiled and said, "What opinion do you want?" Ning Ke said, "I want to know who the drunkard listens to." Cheng Lishue said, "Of course it is Hao Ian." Ning Ke looked at him quietly and said, "Now that Hao Ian is not in the human world, who is responsible for passing Hao Ian's words to the drunkard? It used to be the Revelation Divine Palace. Who is it now?" Chapter 1032. I'm not feeling well, and I still have things to deal with tomorrow, so there won't be any updates. Also, I wasn't able to post a review earlier, saying that I was muted. That's really puzzling. When I feel better, I'll ask about the situation. Chapter 1033. First, there are no updates today, so I'm feeling rather uncomfortable. Second, I figured out that it was a mistake by the subversion of Drunk Blue Silk. I'm speechless. I'll report this to everyone. Chapter 1034. Cheng Lishue only said one thing. The Abbey Dean has always lived on the Peach Mountain. Ning Ke knew what he was trying to say. He looked at the rain and said, "Zhao Nanhai wants to be the Revelation Temple. You're still alive. That means something." Cheng Lishue was silent. Ning Ke turned around and continued, "Your words still count in the divine hall of revelation. Otherwise, you would have been dead. Why would the people on the Peach Mountains send you to Chong and for me to kill? I came to talk to you not because of old friendships, but because you're still alive. That proves your power. If you think you are too weak, I can even provide you with some power. I have people in the divine halls of West Hill." Cheng Lishue laughed. He knew who Ning Ke was talking about, but he thought it was ridiculous. But he was in a heavy mood and couldn't laugh. Ning Ke asked, "Why are you so quiet?" Cheng Lishue thought for a while and explained, "Silence represents will, a very precious will, such as piety, determination, and faith." Ning Ke shook his head and pointed to the gray sky above the rain. He said, "If your faith in Hao Ian is pious enough, she should choose you as her successor." The three great divine gods of West Hill had different ways of succession. The great divine god of judgment relied on strength and killing. The great divine god of light appointed the successor, and the great divine god of revelation accepted Hao Ian's will and was directly decided by Hao Ian. When I first met you in the wilderness, General Xu Chang said that you had reached the peak of the see-through state and was only one step away from the knowing destiny state, just like Long Qing. After so many years, Long Qing has already reached the knowing destiny state, or even the peak of it. But what about you? You're still in the same place, looking at the same scenery. Even the rain this spring did not change you. Ning Ke said with pity, "Hao Ian gave up on you a long time ago." Cheng Lishue said calmly, "The threshold of the knowing destiny state is very high. It's normal that I can't make it. Not many people in the cultivation world can reach the knowing destiny state, not to mention that I am still young." A cultivator in his 30s was indeed young to reach the peak of the see-through state, one step away from the knowing destiny state. But that was the past. Open your eyes and look at the human world now. Ning Ke looked into his eyes and said with slight mockery, "There have been many changes over the years. It rained when the headmaster ascended to the sky, and it rained again when she returned to the divine kingdom in spring. In this era where there are so many people in the see-through state and so many people in the knowing destiny state, you, the priest of the Revelation Divine Palace, are still in this state. Don't you feel ashamed?" Cheng Lishue smiled. There was no hint of bitterness in his smile, because he had already tasted enough of bitterness back in spring. If it was before that spring rain, maybe you could really convince me. But that spring rain proved too many things. My faith in Hao Ian has to become devout and firm again, so I dare not be convinced by you. He left the armchair and walked to the front of the stairs. He turned around and said with a smile, "As for who Hao Ian will choose to be the great divine priest of revelation, you are wrong. She chose Long Qing. As long as Long Qing completes the task of wiping out the new stream, he will be the next great divine priest of revelation. Of course, Zhao Nanhai wants to be the great divine priest, but he can't. Long Qing." Ning Kei's voice sounded faintly discernible in the thunderous rain. Is she asking him to kill Yi Su to break the barrier in his heart? Will Yi Hongyu let him kill her? Chung Lishue said, "What can the great divine priest of judgment do? Or are you waiting for her to do something? You said that you have someone on the Peach Mountain who can help me. You must be referring to her. But do you think that you can change the divine halls of West Hill? Why would you have such a childish idea?" Ning Kei said, "No matter how childish it is still an idea. It is better than nothing. Besides, from the moment Hao Ian Taoism decided to destroy the new stream, she would definitely do something." Chung Lishue said, "You don't believe in religion, so you can't understand many things." "Yes, I have never understood what she wants to do." Ning Kei stood up and looked at the blood stains that were washed away by the rain. He thought of her coming to the Yinming Lake in the wind and rain. He said, "If you don't want to go back to the Peach Mountain, at least send her a message for me." Chung Lishue asked, "What message?" "Tell her to run away." Ning Kei said, "No matter if she wants to help Yi Su or do something else, don't try. Don't make any plans. Don't even think about it. Just run away as fast and as far as you can." Chung Lishue said after a moment of silence, "Maybe you have underestimated the great divine priest of judgment." Ning Kei said, "Since the first day I met her, I have never underestimated her. I know that she must have her own ideas and plans. Her silence must mean that something is about to happen. I know that she will not overestimate herself, but I am worried that she will underestimate someone." "Ooh, the Abbey Dean, even if he's a cripple now." Ning Kei said, "With her current state, she has no chance of winning against the Abbey Dean. Her plans are nothing in the Abbey Dean's eyes, so she must run away." Chung Lishue did not agree with him. He said, "Do you think that the great divine priest of judgment will underestimate her opponent, especially one as powerful as the Abbey Dean? I know that she will not underestimate her opponent, but she has no experience fighting against the Abbey Dean. She does not know that the Abbey Dean is a real powerhouse that cannot be overestimated." Ning Kei said, "I am most worried that she is scheming now. The Abbey Dean will not fall into her schemes." Chung Lishue said, "Didn't the Abbey Dean fall into the Academy's scheme during the Battle of Chang'an?" Ning Kei said, "It is different, because my schemes are God's." In fact, what he wanted to say was that his soul did not belong to this world, so the Abbey Dean could not calculate him. But to Chung Lishue, it sounded disrespectful to Hao Ian. He said after a moment of silence, "The Academy is no match for Taoism. The Tang Empire will be destroyed. Even if the great divine priest of judgment leaves Peach Mountain and joins hands with you, what is the point of this struggle? You and the old members of the Revelation Divine Hall are not willing to join because you think it is a desperate struggle?" Ning Kei said, "What I don't understand is why everyone thinks that Taoism will win in the end. From a moment Lu Yiqing killed the emperor of the South Jin Kingdom, the world has changed. The outcome of the war has become something that can be decided by a few people." Chung Lishue said, "Judging the situation has become a simple arithmetic problem. It will be much more difficult for you to instigate me and the Revelation Divine Hall." Ning Kei was silent for a moment and then said, "I really want to know how you calculated. I want to pick up my wife at noon. She suddenly felt dizzy when she answered my call. She thought it was an earthquake. I told my colleagues and sisters, but no one believed me. After I went downstairs, I saw that the yard was full of people and realized that it was an earthquake. It was an earthquake in Songyuan, and it was quite far from where we are. Then I went home for lunch and bought her some tofu pudding. It was salty, and I put it on the table. I didn't notice that the bag was not tied tightly, so it spilled all over the table. There was gravy and white tofu pudding everywhere. After walking the dog, I rubbed between my eyebrows and started to work. She has not been feeling well for the past 2 days. She has been sleeping since noon. Chapter 1035. There were very few people who had the ability to influence the course of the entire human world. That was why Chung Lishua said that the problem was simple. However, Ninkei had a different idea and wanted to see the simple answer. Chung Lishua looked at him and said, Mr. First can only stay in the palace with the Tang Emperor until you come back from the Xiankong Temple. He can't leave Chang and until you come back from the Xiankong Temple. But he still has to follow the drunkard. Mr. Second held up the entire Buddhism sect with a sword, which shocked the cultivation world. But he can't leave the Xiankong Temple in a short time. After all, he is not the headmaster of the academy. He continued, Mr. Third's whereabouts are elusive, and no one seems to know. But in fact, we all know that she has always been on the grasslands with Tang, leading the powerhouses of the Desolate Man's tribe to secretly kill the people of the Eastern Royal Court. Ning Kai said, the Eastern Wilderness is not far from Yin and Chang'an. Chung Lishua said, but she won't go back to the south. As the current Grand Master of the Devil's Doctrine, how can she waste her time on the people of the East Royal Court? She is aiming for the Helan Mountains. The Academy wants the Desolate Man tribe to enter the Western Wilderness and attack the Golden Palace with a Northern Battlefront army. It can't be hidden from the Abbey Dean. Ning Kai said, it's hard to hide it. The key is whether it can succeed or not. You can't deny that the Academy has a high chance of success. Chung Lishua smiled and said, you used to serve in the army in the city of Wei. You should know how powerful the Golden Palace is. Why lie to yourself? Even if she is the 23-year cicada cultivation, she can't defeat the Golden Palace alone. How can she have time to worry about the Central Plains if she wants to complete the Academy strategy? Ning Kai said, I don't want Third Sister to be too tired. Chung Lishua said, since the three of them are not here, who is left in the Academy? Chun Pippi's ocean of Qi and mountain of snow has been destroyed. Tang Xiaodang has fled with him. Su Qi is struggling under the pressure of General Buell and several high priests. How can you and the few people in the back mountain fight against the endless powerful cultivators of Haotian Taoism? Ning Kai said after a moment of silence, none of these are problems. Chung Lishua looked at his calm face and mocked. The Abbey Dean, the Hierarch, Zhaonan Hai, Long Qing, and Hemu, no matter who they are, you don't have the confidence to win. How could you say it's not a problem? Ning Kai said, fighting is not like playing chess on a chessboard. In my opinion, these powerhouses from Haotian Taoism are all problems that I can solve, so they're not a problem. In fact, you have missed one person. The middle-aged priest who is pushing the Abbey Dean's wheelchair seems to me to be far more troublesome than Zhaonan Hai and Long Qing. Chung Lishua asked, why do you think so? Mysterious people always look scarier. Of course, I just think that he's more troublesome. I won't be afraid because I still think that this is a problem that can be solved. Ning Kai looked into his eyes and said, as long as the drunkard and the butcher can be taken care of, the divine halls of West Hill is nothing to me. This is what I want to give you. From the beginning till now, the Academy's judgment of the situation in the human world had always been clear. They helped the new stream to spread, Chang, and to prepare for war. Yu Lian entered the wilderness, and Jun Mo shook the Xiankong Temple with his sword. Whether it was intentional or not, these actions were all to shake the foundation of Haotian Taoism and destroy it as soon as possible. Only in this way could they cut off the source of Haotian's power and help the headmaster defeat Haotian. To destroy Haotian Taoism in the world of Haotian Taoism, they would have to fight many tough battles. The Abbey Dean was now a useless man. Even though he was still wise, he was not as powerful as when he came to Chang'an alone. No matter how many young powerhouses were born in the spring rain, they would not be able to defeat the three masters of the Academy. Unfortunately, before Haotian left the human world and returned to the Divine Kingdom, he found the two most powerful guardians for his followers and trapped the two most terrifying watchdogs for Haotian Taoism. As I said, this is a simple arithmetic problem. Any child who has attended a private tutor for 2 days can calculate it clearly. Who doesn't know who the Academy wants to kill? Chung Lishue said, the problem is, these two people are unkillable. Ning Ke said, as long as they are human, they are impossible to be unkillable. Chung Lishue said, in a sense, those two people are no longer human. Ning Ke said, the Abbey Dean was as powerful as the sea and was not immortal. But he was also seriously injured by the Academy and was about to die. Chung Lishue said, the biggest difference between the drunkard and the butcher and the Abbey Dean is that they are better at staying alive. They could survive under the gaze of Hao Yin for so many years and survive the long, everlasting night. It seems that time can do nothing to them. Even the headmaster did not do anything. How could you kill them? Ning Ke said no more and said, the day we killed them, did you and the Revelation Divine Hall come and return? Chung Lishue's expression turned serious and said, where does the Academy's confidence come from? Ning Ke turned around and looked at the waterfall of autumn rain in silence. It was already late autumn in the south of the South Jin Kingdom. The leaves on the mountains outside of Lincoln were not too yellow. After being washed by the rain in the morning, the leaves were green, as if it was spring again. The drunkard and the eldest brother were walking on the mountain road, casually. They did not walk side by side, and it was hard to tell who was first with the naked eye. Of course, they did not hold hands, but they were still temporary companions on the journey. The Abbey Dean was sitting in a wheelchair. They were the two fastest people in the world, but they walked very slowly on the mountain road in the rain and looked very elegant and calm. In fact, I know very well that the Academy has always wanted to kill me, more than the butcher. Because I'm faster than the butcher, I am the biggest threat to you. The raindrops fell on the drunkard's gown and rolled down like dewdrops on a lotus leaf. His voice was also like the raindrops, without the usual vicissitudes and decay. The eldest brother looked at the blood on the front of his gown and said, and you used to be the one I wanted to hold hands with the most. The drunkard smiled and asked why. The eldest brother said, we want to help the headmaster defeat Hao Yin, so we have to destroy Taoism. The drunkard said, doesn't that mean you have more reason to kill me? The eldest brother said, you have nothing to do with Taoism. If you can hold hands with the Academy and destroy Taoism, it will be just a matter of a thought. I think there will be less bloodshed in the human world. The drunkard said, that was before. Since the moment she appeared in front of me, I had a relationship with Taoism. The eldest brother said, she has already left the human world. The drunkard smiled and said meaningfully, they all say that you are the most benevolent, kind, and trustworthy person in the world. I didn't expect you to persuade me to betray my trust. What do you mean? Trust is human speech. She is not human, so she cannot be trusted. The eldest brother suddenly became silent. After a long time, he pointed at the drunkard's gown and said, those are all lies. Betrayal is betrayal. But if you can betray me, I can even turn a blind eye to the governor's blood, not to mention other things. I haven't updated so late for a long time. When Janine is in a relationship now, I'm not in the mood to work. Have a good weekend. Chapter 1036. The eldest brother was very calm when he said this. His eyebrows were still straight, and his eyes were still straight. But one could feel that behind this calmness, there was a deep and cold pain. The drunkard was also calm when he heard this. But his calmness was serious, because the invitation from the Academy was related to betrayal. But he had to believe it since it came from the eldest brother. For thousands of years, he and the butcher did not have many grudges with the Academy or with the headmaster of the Academy until the death of the governor last night. If they could let go of those grudges and join hands, they might be able to destroy the Peach Mountain, burn the divine halls, and destroy Taoism, and shake the foundation of the world of Hao Yin. It was quiet on the green mountain outside Lincoln. He looked at the world in the autumn rain and said nothing. The flagon tied to his waist swayed gently in the wind and rain, like a small boat in the surging waves. The rain gradually thinned, and the clouds above the mountains became thicker and thinner. The light gradually shifted. As time went by, he remained silent and did not reply to the invitation from the Academy. The mountain path was filled with tension and suffocation. The answer, to a certain extent, would determine the direction of a human world. It was reasonable to think about it for a long time. As the sun gradually set and the sky darkened, the twilight dyed the clouds red and then burned them to ashes. The night finally came, and a bright moon appeared in front of them. Finally, he broke the silence and gave his answer. The drunkard's answer was very simple. He only said 2 words, no. The moonlight shone on the eldest brother's cheeks, and he looked a little pale. Why? Because Hao-Ian is omnipotent. The drunkard looked at the moonlight on his face and said calmly, that spring rain, Hamu, the barbarian youth in the north, and the former Abbey Dean are all proofs. For countless years, the butcher and I have hidden in the human world and watched Taoism rule the world. I have seen too many similar scenes. Although Taoism has never had a human as powerful as your headmaster, Hao-Ian has proved too much. Hearing this, the eldest brother shook his head and pointed at the night sky. He said, the headmaster once said, and more than once, that Hao-Ian is omniscient and omnipotent. But he never really believed it. That's why he went up to the sky and fought against heaven. That's why there was a bright moon in the human world. His finger was pointing at the beautiful moon in the night sky. The drunkard followed his finger and said, but look, the face of the moon has been changing secretly. Ordinary people can't see its darkening, but how can you and I not? In the eternal night, the headmaster was the only moon. The dimming of the moon meant that the headmaster was gradually weakening. A powerhouse like the drunkard would not be wrong about the astronomical phenomenon. In fact, the academy was well aware that it was a fact. The disciples, including the eldest brother, had been in a state of anxiety. But since it's still lit up, there's hope, eldest senior brother said. The drunkard shook his head and said, even if it can shine for tens of thousands of years, what's the point to me? What I want is eternity. Apart from Hao-Ian, who can grant me eternity? If your teacher can't do it himself, how can he help me? Since the academy can't give me what I want, how can they convince me? Eldest brother was silent for a long time before he asked, are these really that important? The drunkard looked at him and said, the meaning of life is to survive. The eldest brother said, shouldn't it be experience? The drunkard sneered. Only those who can't be eternity will ignore the meaning of eternity. Only those who can't eat grapes will say that it's sour, and say such sour and useless nonsense. Eldest brother sighed and said, then in your opinion, the word love must be sour and useless. As I said before, I have no love for the human world. What is love? After all, you are still too young and not old enough. You don't understand that in the face of time, these words are really insignificant. Speaking of this, the drunkard's eyes revealed some sadness and nostalgia. He said, I am old enough, I have lived long enough, and I have seen enough things. Joys and sorrows, parting and reunions are constantly replayed in front of me. For me, there is nothing new in the world, so why can't I see through it? Time will kill all your old friends, turn your new friends into old friends, and then kill them again. You will become a wise man who is indifferent to love, and you will become a walking corpse whose body and soul are rotten. But at the same time, you will think a lot, and you will finally understand that the meaning of life is to exist, and there is nothing else to ask for. He looked at the night sky and said calmly, I've been with this damn thing time for too many years. I know very well how invincible it is, so I will not miss any opportunity to defeat it. The drunkard tonight was a little different from before. In the past, no matter in the small town or in the Xiankong temple, he was not powerful like a stone in the wilderness. But now he was a steep mountain, because in the past, he restrained himself without thinking and went with the flow, like a rotten wood or a stone that could not speak. But tonight, he was thinking and expressing his thoughts, so the mountain came alive. Hearing this, eldest brother was silent for a moment, and then asked, then, what about freedom? The drunkard said, what is freedom? It is mastery, understanding, and the boundary of knowledge and vision. Indeed, it is more wonderful than love and desire. But who can be free? The eldest brother shook his head and said, "There is no absolute freedom, but we will yearn for it, so we will pursue it." The headmaster used to fly in the dark sky. I think he must have been very happy, even though he was lonely at that time. The drunkard squinted and said, "Even if touching the boundary will lead to death? Even if breaking the boundary will lead to death?" Because of what happened to Sang Sang, youngest brother once taught me that we should not destroy all possibilities just because of a bad possibility, because life is the combination of countless possibilities. Eldest brother said, "Then to live without possibility is to die." The drunkard said, "Maybe the outside world is never as good as you think." Youngest brother once said that the destined journey of mankind is the sea of stars. The eldest brother looked at the stars in the night sky, as if he was looking at the real stars outside the night sky. He smiled brightly and said, "Although I don't like to travel far, every time I think about it, I feel excited and overjoyed. I feel that there is a great joy in it, which can even surpass the fear of death." The drunkard thought for a long time and asked, "What is the name of such a joyful journey?" The eldest brother said, "It should be called free and unfettered travel." Hearing the words free and unfettered travel, the drunkard looked at the stars in the sky and forgot how to speak. Surprise? Don't you feel surprised? Yes, I said in the comments section that I wouldn't update today, but I feel better, so I wrote it. It's mainly because I like this chapter and attach great importance to it. Yeah. Chapter 10:37. The drunkard looked at the stars in the sky and kept silent for a long time. The emotion in his eyes did not dissipate, as if he had drunk too much wine and strayed into the depths of the sea of stars. He was so drunk that he did not know where to go back, even if he knew. Or it's really beautiful. He looked at the stars, and his eyes suddenly showed some fear, like a child seeing the strange world on the other side of the mountain. He was full of fear and uneasiness, and his voice trembled, but it's also terrifying. The sweetest honey was often the most poisonous arsenic, and the most beautiful yearning was sometimes the greatest fear. It was good to be free, but bad to have nothing to rely on. Everything depended on one's thoughts. The eldest brother sighed softly, knowing that the drunkard had woken up and made a decision. The drunkard looked back at him and said seriously, "Existence is the most important thing to me, more important than anything else. I can give up a lot for it." The eldest brother said, "Existence and pursuit are not contradictory." The drunkard said, "But the pursuit of the academy is contradictory to the will of Hao-Yin." The eldest brother said, "What does Hao-Yin's thought have to do with our existence?" The drunkard said, "I can exist for so many years because I will never fight a battle that I will definitely lose. Even your headmaster can't defeat Hao-Yin. How can I?" The eldest brother kept silent for a long time and suddenly said, "What about the academy?" The drunkard slightly raised his eyebrows. The eldest brother looked at his eyes quietly and said, "If you don't go against Hao-Yin, you will go against the academy. You don't have the confidence to defeat Hao-Yin. So how can you be sure that you can defeat the academy?" The drunkard's raised eyebrows turned into two still strokes in the night wind. The eldest brother said, "If we can't instigate a rebellion, we will settle it anyway." The drunkard said, "What can the academy do?" The eldest brother said, "The academy will fight desperately." The academy once fought desperately in the Lank Temple in the autumn rain. Later, in Chong, and in the Verdant Canyon, and in the wilderness, the academy once fought desperately against the enemies with their own lives. The disciples of the academy were proud and even narcissistic. They valued their own lives and the lives of their peers more than anything else. When they started to fight desperately, it meant that they were in a desperate situation, and they would certainly burst out with unimaginable brilliance. The sage of sword Liu Bai, the chief monk of scripture, and the abbey dean. No matter how powerful the academy's opponents were, once they started to fight desperately, there would be no one or Hao-Yin that they couldn't defeat. Would the drunkard and the butcher be exceptions? What's interesting is that those in the academy who are willing to risk their lives can't catch up with me. For example, Lin Wu, Jun Mo, and even Ning, Quebec. Those who can catch up to me won't risk their lives. The drunkard looked at him and said calmly, "If the Academy wants to fight with me, you are the best and even the only choice. You and I are both distanceless. We walk the same path and see the same scenery. That's why we can meet. This is the premise of fighting with your life. But are you sure that you will fight with your life?" Eldest brother said, "Everything can be learned. I'm good at learning." The drunkard said, "When we were outside the Shinkong temple, I praised you for your rapid progress. You were much stronger than when you were fighting against the Abbey Dean. You are indeed the headmaster's favorite disciple. You are indeed good at learning and better than Jun Mo and Lin Wu. But are you sure you can learn to fight desperately?" The eldest brother sighed and said, "It's easy to risk one's own life, but it's difficult to risk others' lives." The drunkard said, "That's what I proved last night. You have learned to fight, inherited the wooden stick, and killed people. But you still can't kill people because killing is different from killing." The eldest brother said, "Or I can bring people who can kill. You can bring the Bodhi tree back to the Academy, but you can't bring people to attack from thousands of miles away. How far can you bring Jun Mo like that day in the Shinkong temple?" The drunkard said, "That's what I'm most afraid of. If you can really bring Lin Wu to attack from thousands of miles away to kill me, what else can I do other than hiding in the small town beside the butcher?" The eldest brother said bitterly, "If you go back to the small town, the youngest brother's arrow will arrive." The drunkard's expression changed slightly. He realized that the Academy had planned this beforehand, but failed to implement it. That was why they had this conversation today. The autumn wind suddenly blew, and the water drops on the leaves fell down. His figure suddenly disappeared. The eldest brother looked a little angry. The dense water drops fell on his cotton-padded gown as if falling on the beach. A lot of wetness was formed, and then it quickly disappeared. The rain fell on the ground, but not all of it seeped into the rocks and soil. There was a shallow puddle on the ground in front of his feet, and an ant was struggling in the puddle. He looked down at the puddle in silence and flicked his fingers. A golden leaf came without any wind and fell on the water. Not long after, the ant climbed to the edge of the leaf with difficulty and saved its life. The puddle trembled slightly, and a shadow covered it. The drunkard returned to the forest. His figure blocked the starlight, and he looked gloomy. The eldest brother looked up at him and asked, "Why did you kill people again?" There was no fresh blood on the drunkard's gown, but someone had indeed died. "I've said that the Academy shouldn't try to kill me, no matter how mild, because I will feel fear and pain. So I will kill people to make you feel pain and fear. This time, who's the one who died? I don't know. Maybe an ordinary person?" The drunkard said emotionlessly, "Maybe the Tangs or the Yans. I just kill people, and I don't choose my targets. Maybe I will kill the desolate next time." The eldest brother was silent. The drunkard looked at him and said with pity, "The benevolent love. You don't dare to kill, and you don't want me to kill, so you can't risk your life to fight with me. So you can only learn to accept it. The Academy should be quiet from now on. Wait until the divine halls burn hundreds of thousands of followers of the new stream, and clear the world around the Tang Empire, and then burn the last one." The eldest brother stared into his eyes and asked, "What does killing mean to you? You have already regarded yourself as an inhuman being, so you don't have any psychological barriers and even indulge in it?" "I don't have any psychological barriers, but I don't indulge in it." The drunkard walked to the edge of the cliff and looked at the human world under the night sky. He looked at the sparse lights in Lincoln and said calmly, "I'm not a person who kills indiscriminately. In my eyes, mortals are like chickens and dogs. Even if I am a twisted and perverted person, I might find pleasure in killing my own kind. But what's so exciting about killing chickens and fish like me?" The eldest brother walked to him and looked at the human world under the night sky and the lights in Lincoln with his hands behind his back. He held the other end of the stick in his right hand and said, "Nothing can be changed." The night was long, but it disappeared in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the red and warm morning sun jumped out of the ground and lit up the mountains in the autumn rain. The drunkard said, "The sun will rise again, and the day will never be dark. In a world of Hao Yin, only Hao Yin can be eternal, and this is the law that you can't change. The eldest brother said, the Tang Empire doesn't have the habit of surrendering, and neither does the Academy. I may not be able to change the law of the world, or you, but at least I can change myself. The drunkard looked at his right hand that was holding the stick and asked, You want to kill me? The eldest brother said, I can't kill you, but I can kill others. The drunkard frowned and said, You mean change, even degeneration? The eldest brother said, Yes, even degeneration. The drunkard was silent for a moment and asked, Who are you going to kill for me? The eldest brother said, I'm going to the small town to see the girl who sells wine. I want to see if she is beautiful. I want to ask her how old the wine is and if you owe her money. The drunkard was silent for a long time and said, Go ahead. Chapter 1038. The autumn rain was still falling quietly as before. Suddenly, there was a hurried sound of hooves coming from the foot of the mountain. Some cavalrymen broke through the rain and shouted something. The eldest brother, who was about to leave, glanced at the drunkard. The cavalryman was soaked. His handsome war horse was covered with mud. The solemn and magnificent black and gold armor was no longer what it used to be. He looked extremely embarrassed. It was a cavalryman from the divine halls of West Hill. It seemed that there was something urgent. The drunkard raised his eyebrows slightly. It was a rare reaction for him, because there were not many things in the world that could move him. It was very difficult to find him and Li Man in the autumn rain. At this moment, only one cavalryman came to the foot of the mountain. The divine halls of West Hill must have sent tens of thousands of people to search for them. What was going on? The cavalryman knelt down in the rain and dared not to get up. He told the drunkard the news that the divine halls wanted the drunkard to know with a trembling voice. Ning Ke started killing people in Chang. Listening to the cavalryman, the drunkard raised his eyebrows higher and higher, while the eldest brother's eyebrows became more and more flat. They had different emotions. The divine halls of West Hill did not know who Ning Ke had killed and how many people he had killed. They only knew that he started killing people. And according to the information from the Tang Empire, all the prefectures and counties were preparing to kill people. Before, I was really going to leave to kill people. The eldest brother turned around and looked at the drunkard. His flat eyebrows hid deep guilt and self-blame. He said, But now it seems that the youngest brother is much braver than me. This determination has nothing to do with bravery. It is just a habit. He is used to killing people and fighting with others' lives. As I said before, he is good at risking his life. The drunkard said expressionlessly, But as I said before, I have no love or hate for the human world. So Ning Ke's method is meaningless to me. The eldest brother pointed at the cavalryman kneeling down in the rain and said, But it is useful to Taoism. Otherwise, they would not be looking for you so anxiously. Maybe you should listen to their opinion. Hearing this, the cavalryman lowered his head even more and his voice trembled even more. He looked so pitiful, like the weak yellow leaves in the rain that could be broken at any time. Please wait a little longer. The drunkard said sarcastically, No matter how many people Ning Ke killed in Chang and yesterday, and no matter how many people he will kill in the future, do you think I care about the lives of those ordinary people? What's the point of waiting? Eldest brother said, Killing all the Tangs is not the ending you want. You're also waiting to be persuaded. What youngest brother did was just to give you a reason. The drunkard said, That's too childish. Do you think we won't kill each other if you kill each other? Is he really not afraid of chaos in the world? The eldest brother said, The world that Hao Yin wants to rule is not a cold and uninhabited world. That way, she will also die, so she doesn't want to see the world destroyed. The drunkard's eyes turned sharp and he yelled, Does he really dare to destroy the world? Not to mention Hao Yin. Even the headmaster would kill him directly. How preposterous! The eldest brother said, No one can change the youngest brother's decision. Neither Jun Mo nor I can persuade him. Hao Yin has no influence on him. As for the headmaster, the only person who can probably control him He's not back yet. If he really wants to destroy the world, who can stop him? At this moment, dense hoofbeats came from afar. The sound was even louder than the sound of falling rain. Hundreds of cavalrymen of the divine halls galloped from Lincoln to Autumn Mountain from other places. The eldest brother looked at the scene and the anxious cavalryman and said, "The Abbey Dean knows Ning K's decision very well. So, he will definitely try to persuade you." One day in late autumn, the governor of Chuzhou of the Tang Empire passed away. On the same day, 531 people were killed in Chang'an. In the following days, the Tang Empire's states and counties secretly executed a group of prisoners, numbering more than 2,000. These people were old and young, male and female. They were prisoners, but they were not condemned to death. They were executed for only one reason. The drunkard killed the governor, which made the Tang Empire furious and fearful. Ning Ke killed thousands of people to make Taoism furious and fearful. It was an equal revenge, another form of sacrifice. Just as Ning Ke had predicted, the West Hill Divine Palace fell into a frenzy of anger and cold fear after receiving the news. When the Divine Hall learned that the tens of thousands of captives left in the Tang Empire during the previous war were now facing the fate of being secretly executed, these two emotions reached their peak. Fortunately, it only took the Divine Halls of West Hill a day to find the drunkard on Autumn Mountain outside of Lincoln. With the help of Mr. First of the Academy, they persuaded the drunkard to wait for a while. Even if they only waited for a day, it was still a show of respect for Taoism. The cold rain never stopped. The Divine Halls mobilized thousands of South Jean civilians and spent only half a day to build a building on the mountain outside of Lincoln. There was wind outside the building. It was the autumn wind. The autumn wind traveled in the human world, sometimes to the west and sometimes to the east. No one knew which wind would overwhelm the other, and no one knew how the situation would develop. Standing in the building and watching the autumn wind, the drunkard was waiting for the news of how many people Ning Ke had killed and how Taoism would persuade him. But in fact, he was waiting for the wind in his heart. The eldest brother waited outside the building with a wooden stick in his hand. He looked at the red, yellow, and green leaves all over the mountain. If the drunkard was unwilling to wait, he would hit the autumn wind. Ning Ke closed the oil paper umbrella and brushed off the raindrops on his clothes. He looked to the south and said, "I heard that there is more rain in the autumn in the South Jean. If I were the person in charge of the Divine Halls, I would build a pavilion for the drunkard. It's boring to wait for such a bigwig and senior. I have to serve him well." Chung Li Shue took off his headscarf and let his snow-white hair spread out. He walked to the edge of the city wall and looked at the city of Chang, and that had been washed clean by the autumn rain. After a moment of silence, he said, "As I said the other day, even if you can intimidate Taoism, you can't influence the drunkard. Whether Taoism can persuade him is also a problem. If you want the drunkard to stop, why can't you stop for a while? You should know that you've killed so many people. I only need to be sure that my means can intimidate Taoism. How Taoism can persuade the drunkard is their problem. I believe in the Abbey Dean's wisdom and ability." Ning Ke said, "I can spare the others for now, but I will kill the dozens of people from the military ministry slowly. Otherwise, the people in the Divine Halls will not go crazy." Chung Lishua's eyes were a bit gloomy. The Tang Empire has paid such a big price to capture 7 of the hierarch's relatives. Are you going to give them up? Ning Ke said, "Xiong Chumo can't have sex. His nephew is precious. I will make good use of him. I won't send him to the underworld so early." Chung Li Shue frowned and asked, "Then why did you kill the He family?" Ning Ke said calmly, "For the Tang Empire, some people must die sooner or later. He Mingqi and his family are among them. If so, of course they must die. I'm really in a bad state. It's mainly because of my health. Sorry." Chapter 1039. A few years ago, the northeast border military of the Tang Empire was ambushed in Chongqing of the Yin Kingdom. Even though they managed to kill the Yin Emperor, only a few of them managed to return to Tiang City. Basically, they were annihilated. The city of Wei and the other 7 cities were conquered by the Golden Tribe royal court. Countless soldiers and civilians were turned into bones. Later, the god-stunning array was damaged and Chang was bathed in blood for several nights. All in all, the Tang Empire suffered unimaginable pain and paid a heavy price. Therefore, there were many people on the Tang's revenge list who had to die. Needless to say, those people would definitely die. The revenge started early, much earlier than anyone could imagine. The Tang started their revenge right after the last war. He Mingqi, who was at the top of the kill list, left Chang and with several of his cronies. When he returned to Peach Mountain, he was sent to the south by the Divine Halls to escape from the assassinations of the Tang Empire. However, his family was not so lucky. The military ministry and secret guards paid a heavy price and paid an unimaginable amount of patience to bring his family back to Chang'an. The day before yesterday, Ningke killed people in the autumn rain. The dozens of people sent by the military ministry were all of the same status. Some were He Mingqi's family, some were Xiong Chimo's family, and some are loved by other bigwigs of the Divine Halls of West Hill. The Divine Halls of West Hill protected He Mingqi's family very well. If not for the fact that the military ministry acted fast and snatched them back before the Divine Halls brought them back to Peach Mountain, it would have been hard for me to kill them. Ningke looked at Cheng Lishue and said, in order to bring He Mingqi's mother and brothers back, the military ministry lost more than 300 people. How could they still be alive? Who else should I kill if not them? Cheng Lishue sighed and said, is it worth it to pay such a heavy price just to vent your anger? Ningke looked at the pool of blood under the city wall and the white-haired old woman lying in the pool of blood. He smiled with satisfaction and said, after killing He Mingqi's family, the dead Tangs must be very happy. The Tang soldiers who sacrificed their lives must feel that it was worth it. In this world, whether it's anger or anger, isn't it the same? Hao Ian Taoism must know that this is how the Tangs do things, and also how I do things. No matter what method the Abbey Dean uses, he must convince the drunkard. Otherwise, if the drunkard kills one of our people, I will kill 1,000 of your people. Ningke turned to Cheng Lishue and said, I know that if we continue killing like this, there will be no one to kill within 2 days. But will Taoism be willing to wait until I kill them all? If I can kill He Mingqi's mother today, I can kill Xiong Chimo's uncle and nephew tomorrow. Then I will continue to kill your mother. Are you sure you can bear it? After a moment of silence, Cheng Lishue said, you know very well that this is not the situation that Taoism wants. Ning Ke said calmly, the drunkard wants peace of mind. He wants the academy to not try to kill him. Taoism is taking advantage of the situation. They want the Tang Empire to not help the South Jin Kingdom and the Qinghe River Plain. They want the academy to ignore the new stream. Therefore, the drunkard kills people. Taoism is watching the drunkard kill people. Since killing people is a way to force the other party to do so, I have to kill people as well. Let's see who can last until the end. Now, I will let them go. Do you dare to accept it? Cheng Lishue frowned and asked. Ningke left the city wall and walked to the other side. He looked at the boundless autumn scenery and the faraway wilderness. After a moment of silence, he said, I will continue killing until there is no one left to kill. Cheng Lishue felt his hands were cold. He said, you are crazy. Ningke did not respond. He said, logically speaking, the eldest brother should be the one to fight the drunkard. But I don't want him to. It doesn't fit his aesthetic point of view. It suits me better. Cheng Lishue asked, then how are you going to solve the problem? Ningke said, before I am sure that I can kill all of the other party's mothers and all of them, I will have to compromise. No matter how lonely and desperate the Abbey Dean and I pretend to be, it is just a bluff. Therefore, negotiation is necessary. What I'm doing now is to add some chips to the negotiation. Using human lives as chips? I said it before. It is interesting, but you don't have to repeat it. You once said that the key is the drunkard's attitude. But why don't you care? I flipped the table and the chips fell all over the floor. This is not the ending that Hao Ian wants to see. She wants to make sure that the chips on the table are neatly arranged, but I dared to flip the table. So, what should I worry about? Ninkei said calmly as he looked at the clear north that was gradually filled with killing intent. Cheng Lishua said, why? What does it have to do with the drunkard? There were two levels to this question. Ninkei did not explain why he dared to flip the table. He just smiled and made his own evaluation of the drunkard. If Hao Ian doesn't want to, he can't do it because he is just a dog. He looked at Cheng Lishua and said with a smile, I am a human being. Why should I care about what a dog thinks? It was raining, and the autumn palace was very cold. Liu sat by the window of the imperial study and kept silent for a long time. Then she said, since he said it has nothing to do with the imperial court, then it has nothing to do with the imperial court. Zhang Jing, the grand secretary, looked at her gradually thinning figure and said after a moment of silence, it is disgraceful to implicate and kill prisoners of war. Only he can bear the infamy. The Tang Empire is victorious because of the Academy, and the Academy is victorious because of the unscrupulous Ning Quebec. Liu turned to Zhang Jing and said, this is something that we should be glad about. If anyone in the imperial court dares to talk about this, all of you should know what to do. Zhang Jing sighed and said, of course. The autumn rain continued, and the autumn wind continued, rising and falling. The red and yellow leaves were soaked in the water until they became soft and almost seeped into the cracks of the bluestone slabs. The waiting went on. Ninkei was still standing on the city wall, staring at the far north. He had been staring at the south a few days ago, but now he suddenly changed his direction. He said that the drunkard was a dog raised by Hao Ian, so he didn't care about what the drunkard thought. However, he really didn't care. Even if he was a dog, he was the fiercest dog, and he ran too fast. These days, the Tang Empire was still killing people in various states and prefectures. He calmly accepted all the infamy and responsibility, and only asked the imperial court to keep a secret. He didn't want the proud Tangs to lose their pride because of this. At the same time, he didn't forget to let the hundreds of millions of people outside the Tang Empire know about this, because he wanted to spread fear. Death was the best way to spread fear. However, it took time and a medium to spread the news of death. So he chose some trustworthy people to do it. A few days ago, he chose Chu Yuxian and Qinshi, which meant that they would go to the West Hill Divine Palace to negotiate and frighten people along the way. No Tangs could refuse the Academy's arrangement, but their reactions were different. The night before Qinshi left, he played 3 games of Gamoku with his favorite concubine, and Chu Yuxian got drunk in the House of Red Sleeves. Chapter 1040. I have a problem with my body. It's not a big problem, but it's very annoying and affects my daily life. The doctors don't have any good solutions. These few days, they have been trying to solve it. It's not very successful, but there are signs of it getting better. I won't talk about the specifics, but there are many situations that I can only face alone, such as sickness. There shouldn't be any updates for the next few days. While I get through this evil 36 years old, I'll see if it will clear up or if everything will go smoothly. I'll report to everyone. Thank you for your understanding. Chapter 1041. The carriage was shaking in the autumn wind, and there was a whistling sound coming from the window. Raindrops came from the wind, and the curtain was wet in a short time. The oil lamp in the carriage was flickering, and it seemed that it would go out at any time. Under the light, Chu Yuxian looked pale, not because of fear, but because his father, who was sitting opposite him, was even paler than him, and he was crying. Tears streamed down old Master Su's face as he gripped his son's hand tightly, refusing to let go. Perhaps it was because the carriage was shaking too violently, but his voice was trembling as well. All these years, we've spent tens of thousands of taels of silver on you. The family wanted to give you a good life, but who would have thought that we would send you down this road of death? If I had known this, I wouldn't have let you enter the academy. Hearing this, Chu Yuxian was silent for a long time. Suddenly, he lifted the curtain and pointed to the gray sky and the wind and rain, saying, "Father, a person's life is just like the sky. No one can predict what kind of weather we will encounter. But I know that we will encounter something sooner or later, so we have to do something big. The thing between the imperial court and the divine hall this time is the biggest thing in the past 1,000 years. He retracted his hand, pointed at his own nose, and said, "And I, your son, am going to handle this matter. Don't talk about a few thousand taels of silver. Even if you take out 10 million taels of silver, you won't be able to buy this position. But what's the use of you going there?" Old Master Chu cried and said, "Whether the imperial court or the academy wants to negotiate with the divine hall, it's the bigwig's business. It doesn't matter if you go or not. It's their business. Why do you have to take the risk?" Chu Yuxian didn't explain it clearly and said, "Don't think too much. Didn't you say that we will fix the genealogy in the spring? You have to do it well. If I really can't come back, my memorial tablet must be placed in a good place." Old Master Chu was furious and scolded, "Stop saying such unlucky words. You are the only child of the Chu family. How can you die?" Chu Yuxian didn't take it seriously and said, "I'm just saying." Old Master Chu slapped him on the head. He knew that he couldn't change anything, so he forced a smile and scolded, "Even if you die, how can you expect to fight for a good position in the ancestral hall? Don't tell me you dare to put it on your grandfather's head." Chu Yuxian said angrily, "If I die, I will die for my country. Why can't I?" The curtain was lifted slightly, and the wind and rain seeped in. Qinshi walked in with an expressionless face. Old Master Su knew that it was time to leave. He sighed and walked out of the carriage. Looking at his father's stooped back, Chu Yuxian was speechless. In the end, the father and the son laughed and scolded each other. It seemed that the atmosphere was much more relaxed, but he knew very well how his father felt at this time, just like everyone in Chong, and knew that they were going to die. Chun 7 ignored his emotions at this time. He looked at the file in his hand and said, "If you don't want to die, don't think about dying." There were two people who wanted to die in the same sentence, so the meaning was naturally different. Chu Yuxian looked at the think tank of the Fish Dragon Gang and sighed. "They say that you are resourceful, but I really don't believe that you can find a way out of this dead end." Chun 7 still lowered his head and read the information on the file in the dim light. He said, "Those are not important things." After a moment of silence, Chu Yuxian smiled and said, "You are right. It is not important whether we can go back to Chong and alive or not." Everyone knew that they represented the will of the Tang Empire and the Academy in this trip to the divine halls of West Hill. But they did not have an official identity. They were Ning Kei's personal representatives because they had thousands of bloody heads in their hands, which could not be put on the table to tarnish the reputation of the Tang Empire and the Academy. So if the negotiation failed, they would naturally leave their bloody heads on Peach Mountain and would never be able to return to Chang'an. Just as Old Master Su was sad and puzzled, many people did not understand why the Imperial Court and the Academy sent them to the divine halls of West Hill. Negotiation was only done on the edge of a knife, but on the battlefield, it seemed to be completely unnecessary. The wheels of the carriage squeaked on the bluestone pavement. The carriage slowly moved out of the city. Chun 7 and Chu Yuxian did not speak anymore. It was not important whether they could go back to Chang'an or not. That was not their task. In this trip to the West Hill, apart from promoting Ning Kei's cold-bloodedness and showing the thousands of heads, their real task was to send a message to someone on Peach Mountain. That message was very important. It cannot be written on paper or spoken. The person who heard it was in the depths of Peach Mountain, and even Mr. First of the Academy could not see her. Therefore, even though the road ahead was dangerous and they might die, Chu Yuxian and Chun 7 still got on the carriage without hesitation and started their own journey. When Chu Yuxian and Chun Bai's carriage drove out of the city in the autumn rain, the person who asked them to send the message was in the imperial study of the palace, staring at the curtain of rain and the tender chrysanthemums in the imperial garden in a daze. In the imperial garden, the young emperor, surrounded by eunuchs and palace maids, walked to the back hall. Looking at the figure by the window from afar, he stopped stiffly and bowed deeply, which was not in accordance with the etiquette, just like how he greeted his teacher who was drifting outside. Ning Kei nodded and watched the emperor's figure disappear in the palace. Then he reached out to close the window to keep out the cold wind and rain. Turning around, he looked at the thinner woman behind the desk and said, "When you are free, go out of the palace more often. You should know how beautiful Chang and is in autumn when it is not raining." Liyu's face was a little pale. It was not because she was ill, but because she had not seen the sun for a long time. After the rebellion, she had never left the palace. Listening to Ning Kei's words, she smiled and did not say anything. She did not explain why she could not leave the palace, because he knew everything. Those courtiers who were once loyal to you no longer dare to betray you. So you don't have to lock yourself in the palace to avoid arousing suspicion. Ning Kei looked at her unchanged expression and knew that it was difficult to persuade her. He frowned and said, "Even if you don't want to leave the palace, you should walk around in the imperial garden, boating on the lake, and picking willows by the lake. I'm not saying that these artistic scenes are important, but you must keep healthy before His Majesty truly matures." Liu put away the scroll and said calmly, "I can live for another few decades. But why did you come down from the city wall today? Don't you need to keep an eye on those horrible bigwigs? Aren't you afraid that something will happen during this period of time?" Ning Kei had lived on the city wall for a long time. He used his iron bow and iron arrows to frighten the powerhouses in the wilderness, just like the drunkard used his speed and killing to frighten the emperor, ministers, and soldiers of the Tang Empire. "I have to take a break," he said, "and some things have to be confirmed before I can be at ease." The disputes in the world were not over. The war between the Tang Empire and the West Hill Divine Palace was about to start. The Academy was not outside the world, so it naturally had to care about these things. Ning Kei trusted Li Yu's ability to govern the country, so he had to get confirmation from her. "I have deduced it many times before. If the Academy can't kill the drunkard, the war will not even start, let alone win." Li Yu looked at him quietly and said, "Do you have a way or not?" Ning Kei said after a moment of silence, "I still need some time." Li Yu said, "That is the problem. The drunkard wandered the world and was not afraid of killing people. He was the biggest threat facing the Tang Empire. If they could not kill him, the war would just be empty talk. For the West Hill Divine Palace, this was not a problem. They could choose when to start the war, and the timing was very important to the victory of the war." Ning Kei said, "So we have to wait for a while." Li Yu said, "So you let Chu Yu Xian and Qinshi go to the West Hill Divine Palace." Ning Kei said, "The joys and sorrows of the world cannot affect the drunkard, but it can affect Taoism. We can only hope that Taoism can affect the drunkard." Li Yu said, "What if they can't? Fortunately, people like the drunkard and the butcher never do meaningless things, including meaningless killing. They are Hao Ian's dogs, so they must carry out Hao Ian's will. And the person who interprets Hao Ian's will is on Peach Mountain." "You mean the Abbey Dean?" "Yes." Li Yu said, "If Chu Yu Xian and Qinshi go to the Qinghe River, will the clans talk to them? If they know that you have killed so many people?" Ning Kei said, "The more people I kill, the more the clans in the Qinghe River will want to talk to me. Even if they don't talk, they will at least invite them to dinner." Li was a little worried. She looked at him and said softly, "But the more people you kill, the more famous you will be. Even the Tangs can't accept such a killing." Ning Kei thought of the scene he had seen from the window and the fear and unhappiness on the face of the young emperor in bright yellow. He couldn't help but laugh at himself and said, "I'm not like eldest brother after all." Li Yu said, "You could be like that." Ning Kei said firmly, "I don't want to be like eldest brother, because he is just a good person, but not a person who can talk to the whole world." "Talk to the whole world?" "Yes." "What do you mean?" "When I speak, the whole world must hear my voice. Has there been such a person before? Of course the headmaster can do it, and so can eldest brother. But they didn't, because as I said before, they are good people. Who has done it? If youngest uncle didn't exist, Lotus could definitely do it, even if he has to destroy the world. That is his purpose, not mine." Ning Kei paused and said, "I just want to talk to the world." It was just a talk. His attitude was very gentle, even a little reserved and humble. But somehow, Liu felt that the air in the imperial study had become cold, even colder than the autumn rain outside the door. She walked to Ning Kei's side and opened the window, letting the wind and rain in, as if she felt that she could get more warmth this way. The autumn rain kept falling in the imperial garden. The golden chrysanthemums were still dazzling, as if they were burning. But in an inconspicuous corner, there were many broken branches and fallen leaves. The wet soil half covered the fruits that were about to rot, like skulls. The entire Tang Empire was shrouded in the cold autumn rain. The withered trees by the road were as wet as the pedestrians under the trees. Just like the execution grounds in each prefecture, there was sticky blood everywhere, and all kinds of skulls were soaked in the blood. This autumn, Ning Ke wanted to talk to the world. Just as he had said to Chung Lishue, since the world refused to listen to his voice quietly, then he would put all his chips on the line. Those falling fruits in the autumn rain and those skulls soaked in blood were all proof of his determination and will. Under such circumstances, Chu Yuxian and Chun Chi's carriage drove out of the verdant canyon, past the misty rain, and arrived at the Qinghe prefecture. Hundreds of crossbows were aimed at the carriage, and dozens of powerful cultivators in the see-through state were waiting silently in the alley on the side of the street. The bigwigs of the warlords in the Qinghe prefecture were not in the manor by the Fuchin River, but in the largest restaurant in Yangzhou. As long as they gave the order, arrows would fall like rain, and dozens of powerful cultivators would attack together. The people in the carriage would not be able to survive. There was dead silence in the restaurant, and the heads of the warlords did not say a word. I haven't seen you for a long time. Bow to the ground. I suddenly think of the sentence I often heard on the Spring Festival Gala. I really miss you. Those who follow my Weibo should know that I have been suffering from tinnitus for the past 2 months. That kind of frustration and pain is hard to imagine for those who have not experienced it. I can only say that I am numb now, but I have to continue living and working. There are some things that should be endured. Perhaps this is the time when I am being tested by Junior Marshal Uncle's words. Please help me get through this period. Thank you very much for your concern for me. Let's live a good life together. This chapter is definitely very messy because I couldn't sleep to write it. I will find time to revise it. I will try to write it tomorrow during the day. Thank you again. Chapter 1042. I've been away from Jianghu for a long time. I didn't know that I was charging 500 words now. I'm sorry. Finally, I thank you. The restaurant was named Jin Sui, a famous and luxurious place in Yangzhou City. The dishes were extremely exquisite, and there were several ancient dishes that had been passed down for thousands of years. They cannot be found in Chang'an City. For the bigwigs of the warlords of Qinghe County, these were nothing. Their attention was not on the table at all. No one raised their chopsticks or glasses. The steam rising from the plates was quickly blown away by the autumn wind and gradually cooled down. Master, should we kill them? The steward knelt on one knee outside the door and asked in a trembling voice. He could no longer stand the dead silence in the room and wanted an answer as soon as possible. The 2 men in the carriage were envoys sent by Chang and city to the West Hill Divine Palace. The hatred between Qinghe County and Chang was as deep as the sea, and there was no room for reconciliation. In order to declare their loyalty to the West Hill Divine Palace and help the Divine Hall solve their inconvenient problems, they had no reason to leave the carriage. Yes, the West Hill Divine Palace wanted these 2 people alive, and there were some people in the West Hill Divine Palace who wanted them dead. Those people's was very clear. However, after a long time, even the faint sound of the wheels rolling on the stone slabs could be heard from afar. The room was still dead silent. The masters of the warlords of Qinghe County were either livid or cold. Their lips did not move at all, and they did not even blink. They were like statues. When Junmo brought Mu Yu to the manor by the Fuchin River, Ning Ke, who was far away on the Peach Mountain, killed the old master of the Chui family with an iron arrow. Since that day, the warlords of Qinghe County had lost all their confidence and were no longer as sharp as before. Therefore, these masters were hesitating and struggling. No one could make a decision. They had to have enough information to help them make a decision. Therefore, they were waiting for the latest news from Chang and city and the news from the various states and counties of the Tang Empire. They wanted to know if the imperial court of the Tang Empire had really done what the rumors said. They want to know if that person was really so ruthless. Several sharp whistles cut through the gloomy sky and the patter of autumn rain. They entered the restaurant and brought the most accurate news. Yes, people were killing in Chang and the Gushan Commandery, the northern military camp, the Verdant Canyon, and everywhere in the Tang Empire. Thousands of captives were executed. Half of the families of the Tang priests who betrayed the divine halls of West Hill were executed. He Mingqi's entire family was executed. Even the family of Xiong Chumo, the hierarch of the divine halls, seemed to be lying in a pool of blood. Too many people died in the autumn rain. The people in the restaurant were mentally prepared for this. They did not forget that in the spring rain, just before the Tang Empire and the West Hill Divine Palace reached an agreement, Ning Ke led the Yulin Royal Guards and the Fish Dragon Gang into the Guild Hall of Qinghe Prefecture and killed everyone inside. Those who had died in the Guild Hall back then were their brothers, their children, and their relatives. How could they forget them? The clan lord's expressions grew increasingly gloomy. They were like ice sculptures under the scorching sun, exuding a chill from head to toe. However, they still did not give the order to attack the carriage on the long street. After a long time, the dead silence in the restaurant was finally broken by an old voice. It was the clan lord of the Song clan, who was the most senior among the clans. He looked at the autumn rain outside the restaurant and said weakly, "Please come upstairs." There was no fighting or killing. When Chu Yuxian and Qinshi walked into the restaurant and walked up the stairs, they saw the 7 clan lords behind the threshold. They saw a peaceful scene and heard very gentle greetings. The dishes on the table had been changed. They were steaming hot and fragrant. The candles under the plates kept them warm even in the cold autumn wind. The clan lords were like statues that had come to life. There were gentle and reserved smiles on their faces, and their eyes were full of enthusiasm. Some of them took Chu Yoxian's hand and sat down, recalling the scenery of the academy in the old days. Some of them bowed to Qinshi and drank with him. They began to discuss which female dealer in the Silver Hook Casino in the western city was the most beautiful. It seemed that they had returned to the old days when the clans treated the imperial envoys from Chang and carefully and dignifiedly in Yangzhou City. It seemed that nothing had happened between the two parties, that the Tang Navy had not been destroyed in the Great Swamp, and that the officials loyal to the imperial court had not been hanged by them. It seemed that Ning Ke had not entered the guild hall in Qinghe Prefecture, that the spring rain had not fallen, and that the autumn rain this year was also fake. After the greetings came the banquet. Although it was not the autumn wind, the clans hoped that the banquet was to welcome 2 people who had come to ask for money. These 2 people represented the imperial court and the academy. So it was the imperial court and the academy who wanted to ask for money. No matter what they wanted, it was fine as long as they did not kill anyone. The clan lords' voices were very low, which was covered by the autumn rain and the tactical array. Even if the great divine priest of the West Hill Divine Palace came in person, he might not be able to hear them clearly. What do Her Highness and Mr. 13 want? The clan lord of the Song clan looked at Chu Yuxian and Qinshi and said humbly, "Money, mines, and even my life, we can talk about it." Ning Ke wanted to talk to the world, and in fact, the world also wanted to talk to him. After he had killed so many people in this autumn rain and expressed his attitude to the world, just as he had predicted, Qinghe Prefecture really wanted to talk to him. The heads had already been laid out. The families in Qinghe County had to consider their future plans. The Divine Hall might win in the end, but they were stuck between the Tang Empire and the Divine Hall. How many of them could survive after the war? However, things in the world were always unsatisfactory. In the past, when Chang wanted to talk, they did not want to talk. Now that they wanted to talk, it was Chang and who did not want to talk. At least Chu Yuxian and Qinshi did not want to talk. They could talk about the scenery of the academy and the beautiful dealers in the gambling house, but they did not want to talk about these things. Because Chang knew very well that Qinghe Prefecture could not return to the Tang Empire, and this was also the premise of the clan's talk. In this case, it was better not to talk. Seeing Chu Yuxian and Qinshi only eating the delicacies on the table, the clan lord of the Song clan said after a moment of silence, "Is it meaningful?" Chinchi put down the ebony ivory chopsticks in his hand, looked at him quietly, and said, "What do you mean? Killing people? No matter how many people Mr. 13 killed, even thousands or tens of thousands of them, what else can he do after killing all the captives and hostages?" The clan lord of the Song clan said worriedly, as if he was one of them, "After all, he can't destroy the world alone." Chin 7 looked at him in silence and then looked around. He looked at these noble clan heads dressed in embroidered robes and had an extraordinary bearing. Suddenly, he laughed. He felt that it was just like what Ning Ke had said before he left Chang'an. It was really interesting. The more people they killed, the more docile they would be. Even if they were still burning with the flames of grief and indignation, they would not dare to do anything. Chinchi's smile gradually disappeared, and his eyes became calm and deep, giving people a strange feeling, which gradually made people at the table uneasy. Chinchi thought of what Ning Ke had said, but he did not say it out loud. He asked directly, "Who wants to kill us?" The clan lord of the Song clan answered without hesitation, "Hierarch." At night, Chinchi and Chu Yuxian sat at the table, thinking about the previous banquet and the conditions put forward by the clans. They looked at each other and could not help shaking their heads. What are these people thinking? Are they betting on both sides? Don't they know that they have no right to bargain? How dare they expect the imperial court to accept the current situation and only pay taxes without stationing troops? Chu Yuxian said sarcastically. Chinchi said, "It's impossible for the clans to side with the imperial court. They just want to show some goodwill in advance. Mr. 13's killing has really frightened many people. Besides, these people in the south always have an inexplicable sense of superiority. They always feel that they have something to gain. Otherwise, why would they betray the West Hill in the first place? But they have no idea what Mr. 13 wants." He thought of what Ning Ke said again, and could not help shaking his head and laughing, but the hidden meaning in his smile was so cold. Chu Yuxian said, "I don't know how Wang Jinglu is doing." Chinchi said, "He has been negotiating with those young people on behalf of Mr. 13 for several years. I think the negotiation should be going well." Those bigwigs of Qinghe Prefecture in the restaurant thought that Ning Ke's killing was meaningless, but they did not know that in Chinchi's eyes, their banquet was meaningless. The people Ning Ke wanted to talk to were never the heads of the clans, but some young people. He thought that they were the real hope. The next morning, Chu Yuxian and Chinchi set off again. They accepted the kindness and money from the clans of Qinghe Prefecture, but did not leave any message. The heads of the clans stood on the shore and watched the ships gradually disappearing in the mist of the great swamp. They felt a little cold when they thought of Chinchi's eyes in the restaurant yesterday, because it was the eyes of a dead man. The great swamp was so vast that the shore could not be seen. Sailing on it was like sailing in the ocean, which made people feel small. Chu Yuxian knew that he would die if he went to the Peach Mountain, so he relaxed and enjoyed the lake view. He stood in the drizzle with a pot of fruit wine in his hand, like a scholar in a desolate state. Unfortunately, his mood was soon completely destroyed because the shadows of many huge ships suddenly appeared on the surface of the lake. Those ships were extremely huge, and their sails covered the sky. They moved on the water like moving mountains, and their auras were astonishing. The navy of South Jin was here. Chapter 1043. Chu Yuxian looked at the thousands of huge ships on the lake and the invincible navy after the destruction of the Tang Navy. His face turned pale. Hearing the commotion, Chun Chi walked out of the cabin, and his face became serious. He did not expect that the South Jin Kingdom could regain its stability in such a short time after Lu Yiqing killed the young emperor of the South Jin Kingdom, and the sword Garrett moved away. The Tang Empire was well prepared for this war. It seemed that the divine halls of West Hill were not slow either. The South Jin Navy sounded the bugle, and the fleet dispersed. The lake water slapped against the sturdy sides of the ships, making a loud noise. A huge ship slowly sailed to a few thousand feet away from Chu Yuxian and Chinchi. It stirred up countless snow-like waves and scared away hundreds of waterbirds. Hundreds of cavalrymen stood on the deck with their horses. They looked majestic. They wore black armors with golden talismans on them. They were the most powerful papal cavalrymen of the divine halls of West Hill. Chu Yuxian was curious why the horses were not afraid of the wind and waves. Qinchi's attention was focused on someone among the cavalrymen of the divine halls. He could clearly see that person's face from a few thousand feet away. It was not because he had sharp eyes, but because that person wanted him to see it. It was a manservant in indigo clothes. His tender eyes were full of unquestionable arrogance, and his innocent expression was full of cruelty, as if he regarded human lives as worthless. Immature but arrogant, innocent but cruel, it seemed very harmonious. Because immature people tended to be arrogant, and innocent people tended to be cruel. The manservant in indigo clothes stood between the lake water, the autumn rain, and the world. It was so harmonious. Qinchi had never seen him before, but judging from his appearance and feeling, he could guess who he was. He was Hongmu Liren, the most generous gift Hao Ian left to the human world. I'm curious. What does Ning Ke want to tell you when he asks you to go to the divine halls of West Hill? Can you tell me in advance? Hongmu Liren looked at Qinchi and Chu Yuxian and asked seriously. Chu Yuxian was a little nervous. Facing the youngest powerhouse in the knowing destiny state of the divine halls of West Hill, he felt that he could die at any time. But Qinchi remained calm and shook his head. Hongmu Liren frowned and was not pleased. The water around the ship seemed to have sensed his emotion and began to sway in fear. The lake water swayed gently. Not far away, a patch of autumn reeds was instantly crushed into powder, blown into a blizzard by the lake wind, and then washed into the lake by the rain. Chu Yuxian felt that his throat was so dry that he was about to smoke. Qinchi remained calm, but his hands behind his back began to tremble. He knew Hongmu Liren was powerful, but he did not expect him to be this powerful. Could Ning Ke defeat him if he left Chang'an? Hongmu Liren suddenly laughed, like a happy child. It could be described as a smile. He looked at Chu Yuxian and Qinchi on the opposite boat and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I won't kill you, so you don't have to be so afraid." He was clearly smiling and even looked a little cute, but there was an inexplicable sense of disdain, like an eye in the sky looking down at an ant on the ground. Qin Seven didn't like this feeling and said, "People will die eventually." Hongmu Liren shook his head and said, "I'm just living here temporarily. I'll go back to the divine kingdom after I finish my business." Separated by hundreds of feet, Qinchi had to use a lot of strength to transmit his voice to the big ship on the opposite side. His soft voice sounded like thunder on the lake. Chu Yuxian felt goosebumps all over his body, not because of the thunderous voice of this young and powerful cultivator, but because of the burp. Qin Seven suddenly said, "I suddenly thought of something that Mr. 13 said." Hearing Ning Ke's name, Hongmu Liren became serious. He leaned forward and said seriously, "What did he want to say to me?" Qinchi repeated, "You will all die. Not you, but you." Even Hongmu Liren was not qualified to be said by Ning Quebec. His words included Hongmu, Long Qing, He Mingqi, the heads of the warlords in Qinghe Prefecture and the enemies on the grassland. Hongmu Liren frowned and said, "Everyone will die, but I won't." Qin Seven said, "If he said you will die, then you will die. Even if you escape to the divine kingdom, you will still die because he will chase you to the divine kingdom and kill you. Those who were supposed to die would definitely die. Even if you go to the divine kingdom and obtain eternal life, even if you go to the underworld and become ghosts, I will still kill you, or more than once." Ning Ke wanted to talk to the world about many things, and what Qinchi said was one of them. Hearing this, Hongmu Liren sneered and said, "He doesn't even dare to leave Chang'an. How can he talk about the divine kingdom?" After getting ashore, Chu Yuxian was still scared. He kept blaming Qinchi for saying Ning Ke's words. If Hongmu was really irritated, they would definitely end up worse than those reeds that melted into snow. He has a high position in the divine halls of West Hill. He said he would not kill us in front of the navy of South Jean, so he won't kill us. Qin Seven said, "Most importantly, the divine halls of West Hill wants to know what Mr. 13 wants us to say. Before they know, we'll be safe." But didn't you see the look on Hungmu Liren's face? He looks so innocent, but he is actually a psycho. What if he really goes crazy? Chu Yuxian nagged. But Qin 7 was thinking about something else. Hungmu is leading the army of South Jin to the north. He will soon take over the affairs of Qinghe Prefecture. Where's Long Qing? As the former divine son of West Hill, Prince Long Qing had a high position in the hearts of the followers of Taoism. But as time went by, Ning Ke and Hungmu Liren had taken away his glory. But Qin 7 knew that Ning Ke thought Long Qing was much more important than Hungmu Liren. He believed that Ning Ke's judgment would never be wrong. It was not a good thing for such an important figure to suddenly disappear. Chu Yuxian said, according to the information from the Imperial Center Administration, the prince has led a group of cavalrymen of the Divine Halls to the Song Kingdom to kill Yi Su. Chun 7 said, Yi Su has thousands of followers of the new stream. He can't go too fast. Long Qing should have caught up with him by now. Chu Yuxian said, I don't understand why the Oracle Yi Su did not go to Chang'an, but took such a great risk to go to the Song Kingdom. Chun 7 said, in the words of Mr. 13, Yi Su is a man who can really change the history. How can we judge such a man with common sense? The two kept moving forward. The autumn rain gradually froze and then turned into snow. The roads in South Jin were gradually dyed white. When they arrived at the West Hill Divine Kingdom, it was already the beginning of winter. In a land blessed by the gods, which rarely snowed in the past, the wind and snow were raging and it was extremely cold. In recent years, the human world had become colder and colder, but no one knew why. On the border of the West Hill Divine Kingdom, two red-robed priests were waiting with dozens of papal cavalrymen of the Divine Hall. There was no kindness on their faces, not even an expression. Their slightly frosty eyes were full of indifference and vigilance. Chu Yuxian and Chun 7 were envoys of the Tang Empire, so they deserved such treatment. They were very satisfied that they did not use divine skills to burn them into ashes. After a few days, they arrived at a vast mountain range. The wind and snow finally stopped. The mountains were green and charming, and some majestic buildings could be vaguely seen among the peaks in the distance. They should be the legendary Divine Halls of West Hill. Looking into the distance, Chu Yuxian slightly opened his mouth and did not say anything. He only let out a sigh. As an ordinary person in the Haotian world, he was shocked to be able to see the Divine Halls of West Hill in his lifetime, even though he was a Tang. Qin 7 had to calm down. As the brains of the Fish Dragon Gang, he habitually observed the military defense of the West Hill Divine Kingdom and the mental state of the cavalrymen. Of course, he was most concerned about the 3 arrays that covered the Peach Mountain. He was not a cultivator, so he could not even see the cyan light. Naturally, he could not understand the horrible power of the array, but he was concerned about it, because even Mr. First of the Academy could not break the array. The 2 red-robed divine priests seemed to have received strict orders. They did not say a word to Chu Yuxian and Qin 7 all the way from the north. They also arranged everything without asking for Chun Vii's and Chun Vii's opinions. The silence made the atmosphere a bit depressing. Chu Yuxian and Chun 7 did not take it seriously. They kept silent until they arrived at the small town in front of the mountain. Suddenly, Chun 7 asked them to stop the carriage. Looking at the red-robed divine priest's eyes, Chun 7 said expressionlessly, I haven't eaten enough on the way. I'm going to buy something to eat. They were only a dozen miles away from the Peach Mountain, and there were many powerful Taoism cultivators hiding around the town. The red-robed divine priest did not think there would be any problem, so he nodded. Chun 7 and Chu Yuxian left the carriage and walked along the road to the town under the protection of the papal cavalrymen. The town was really small. Besides, it was past lunchtime, so the restaurants were closed. The only food they could buy was roasted sweet potatoes. Standing in front of the roasted sweet potato shop, Chun 7 and Chu Yuxian held the hot sweet potatoes in their hands, carefully peeling them and blowing at them. They looked a bit funny and cute, not like 2 messengers who were responsible for the safety of the world, but 2 kids. Chun Vi's fingers were burned by the red and yellow sweet potato meat. He quickly shook his hand and asked the boss for some cold water. When the boss put the basin in front of him, he looked up at him and thanked him with a smile. Chun Vi's fingers moved in the water and left a fleeting handwriting. But the boss didn't seem to see his movement and turned away without any expression. It seemed that there was no deep meaning in his movement, but in fact, if the head was separated from a body, he was shaking his head. Back in the carriage, Chin 7 was a bit disappointed when he thought of the response he saw before. He shook his head and said, "Mr. 13 said we must eat the sweet potatoes in this shop, but I don't know what's so good about them." It was not until then that Chu Yuxian realized that he had finished talking with the man in the roasted sweet potato shop. Hearing this, he knew that things were not going well, so he inevitably felt a bit down. The hard wheels rolled over the bluestone slabs, making a creaking sound. The papal cavalrymen of the West Hill Divine Palace were everywhere. When the sunlight fell on them, it was reflected by their black and gold armors and through the windows, making them squint. Chu Yuxian and Chin 7 looked at each other and squinted in silence. They came to the divine halls of West Hill to negotiate with the world on behalf of Ning, Quebec. Logically speaking, the divine halls would not kill them before they heard what they had to say. But the battle that almost happened in Qinghe Prefecture showed that someone wanted them dead, and that person was the Hierarch Lord of the Divine Halls of West Hill. Ning Ke was not talking to the Hierarch Lord, which might be a bit humiliating for the Hierarch Lord, but it was not enough to make him want to kill them. Now it seemed that the Hierarch Lord might have guessed something. Thinking of the scene where the man in the roasted sweet potato shook his head, Chun 7 said with a heavy heart, "How can I pass the message if I can't even see him?" The Divine Halls of West Hill did not arrange for them to go to the Peach Mountain, but to live in the Revelation Institute in front of the mountain, which was very close to the famous Peach Blossom Valley. Unfortunately, it was winter now, and it was hard to see the beautiful scene of peach blossoms all over the mountain. Chu Yuxian was very sorry about this, and he seemed to be a bit heartless. Chun 7 knew that he was pretending, but there was nothing he could do. Everything was arranged by the Divine Halls, and they could only wait anxiously. The Divine Halls did not give them more time to be anxious. The bigwig in charge of the negotiation came to the Revelation Institute in person the next morning. Zhao Nanhai was the direct descendant of the great divine priest of light from the South Sea, and he was the most powerful supporter of the Abbey Dean. After the war, one of the divine halls of light or the divine halls of revelation would be reserved for him. There was no doubt that he was a real bigwig. He came to talk to two ordinary people like Chu Yuxian and Chin 7, which showed enough respect for the great Tang and showed enough sincerity. But Chu Yuxian and Chun 7 did not think so. Before leaving, Ning Ke had made it very clear that there was only one person in Haotian Taoism who had the power to speak. There was only one person who could and was willing to respond to the wishes of the Tang Empire. If they wanted to talk, they could only talk to these two people. "I'm sorry." Chu Yuxian was very apologetic. He bowed and said, "It's not that I don't want to talk, but I really can't." Zhao Nanhai had been in the South Sea for a long time. Even though he had returned to Haotian Taoism for several years, his skin was still dark. His divine robe fluttered even though there was no wind. "You are the ones who want to talk, so you should be the ones who are anxious." Zhao Nanhai did not get angry. He looked at the two thoughtfully and said, "Let's talk when we want to." After that, he left with a dozen red-robed divine priests, leaving no chance for Chu Yuxian and Chun 7 to speak. Looking at those people disappearing on a mountain road, Chu Yuxian said bitterly, "They don't even want to know who we want to talk to? Why are they so vigilant?" In the following days, Chu Yuxian and Chun 7 were forgotten by the people of the Divine Halls of West Hill. They spent all their time eating, sleeping, and looking at the peach blossoms in the Revelation Institute. The peach blossoms on the Peach Mountain used to bloom all year round. However, they had been cut by the headmaster of the academy and then tortured by Ning Ke and Sang Sang. They had become extremely weak and could not survive the cold winter. They were blown into the mud by the cold, and no one cared about them. Chu Yuxian and Chun 7 felt that they were the peach blossoms that no one cared about. No one came to visit them. They could not see the people they wanted to see, and no one listened to them. It seemed that the negotiation that many people had high hopes for was going to end without any progress. The divine halls of Westhill was indeed not in a hurry. As long as the Academy could not kill the drunkard and the butcher, Taoism would be invincible in this war. No matter how many people Ning Ke killed, it could not change the fact. Therefore, they should be the ones who were in a hurry. Ning Ke's purpose of killing people in the autumn rain was to frighten Taoism and the human world. In a sense, he achieved his goal. But what he did also ignited a fire of anger in the human world. Whether it was the Westhill, the South Jin Kingdom, the Golden Palace, or the Yin Kingdom, those divine priests, soldiers, and people whose loved ones died in his hands all wanted to skin him alive and eat his flesh. He did a great job in mobilizing the divine hall for the war. As time went by, the situation in the world became more and more favorable to the divine halls of Westhill. Ordinary people might not understand it, but people on the Peach Mountain did. There were many people who could understand this trend. For example, the bold and resourceful Chanyu of the Golden Tribe in the wilderness. He knew very well that this long winter was not a torture for him and the warriors in his tribe, but a wonderful wait. Therefore, the fragrance of wine from the magnificent and exaggerated tent in the north of the city of Wei grew stronger day by day, and the number of cattle and sheep slaughtered around the tent, that was like a cloud field, increased day by day. People in the Golden Palace were happy, just like what Ning Ke saw when he returned to the city of Wei. But it should have been happy too. In people's eyes, there was no reason for a young man whose fate had suddenly changed to be unhappy. But he was unhappy. Ado was born in a small tribe on the grassland. He was defeated in a conflict with Chanyu's uncle's tribe. Many young men in the tribe were recruited into the Dare to Die army. Because of his young age, he was taken as a slave by a noble in the Golden Palace. If nothing went wrong, he would not live past the age of 16 because life was too hard. Fortunately, it rained in spring. He was collecting cow dung on the grassland and was soaked. Maybe that was why he became stronger after the rain stopped. That was the real strength, the strength bestowed by the merciful God. In the wrestling contest, the strongest warrior in the Golden Palace was no match for him. Even the terrifying General Lebu looked at him strangely. At that time, Chanyu's eyes were shining, and the national master looked at the sky in silence. After that day, Ado became the most famous young warrior in the Golden Palace. He became the nominal disciple of the national master, the personal guard of Chanyu, and a vanguard general. The war between the Golden Palace and the Tang Empire was intermittent. Although it was not as fierce as before, the situation at the border was still serious. In summer, a fierce conflict broke out for a grassland in the southeast of the Xiangwan Plain. The Tang army, who had lost the Xiangwan Plain, was determined to take it. General Hua Ying, the most powerful man in the Northern Battlefront Army, led the army. But unexpectedly, he lost. He was defeated by Ada. There was no reason for Ada to be unhappy, but he was unhappy because many of his relatives who were recruited into the vanguard army were captured by the Tang. Just a few days ago, he heard that all his relatives were killed by the Tang. All of them were killed. None of them were spared. He had become so strong that he could rebuild his tribe next year. But when he called back all of his family members and friends, they were all dead. Those damn Tang Empire. That Tang called Ning Ke, damn it. That night, Ada left the Golden Palace with a dozen of his cavalrymen. He passed through the deserted city of Wei and headed for the south, with the military order of Chanyu in his hand. Ada did not lose his mind because of anger. He was illiterate, but he was not stupid. He was not crazy enough to go to Chang and to kill Ning Quebec. But he had to do something on behalf of Chanyu and himself. The Tang Empire killed their people, so they would kill the Tang Empire. When Ada arrived at the front line where the two armies confronted each other, he saw the snowy sky and the tightened defense line of the Tang Empire. His eyes were filled with contempt. I can't believe I can write more than 5,000 words. It's been half a year. Chapter 1044. The meadow was 70 miles to the southwest of the city of Wei. Compared to the Xiangwan Plain, it was in the south, but the temperature was lower. The water and grass were not fertile. However, the Tang army was willing to pay a high price to camp here in the snow, ready to attack at any time. Why? Because the Tang army was running out of war horses. They had to take back the meadow before next spring. That was their last hope. On the other side of the snow, the Tang camp was full of bonfires. Thick mattresses covered the backs of the war horses. The Tang army valued the remaining war horses more than their own lives. This only made it feel more contemptuous. He would never sympathize with the weak, just like how he would never sympathize with the defeated general. Was the Tang army, without war horses, still the same Tang army that used to dominate the world with cavalry? Was the man who was killed still the famous general? Hua Ying was drinking in the Tang camp. He was a middle-aged general who was bare-chested. He was sweating profusely, and his pale face was full of pain. In the summer, he was defeated by the young barbarian on the battlefield. Since then, he had never recovered from his injury. He disobeyed the order to drink because only the strong alcohol in the 9-river double-distilled liquor could help him suppress his injury. He could stay awake and continue to lead the 2,000 cavalrymen. In the last war, the Tang Empire signed a peace treaty with the divine halls of West Hill. The heaviest price they paid was to cede the Xiangwan Plain to the Golden Tribe royal court. Princess Liu apologized to the Tang officials and people, and Princely Peiyin even committed suicide. Without the Xiangwan Plain, the Tang Empire lost the main source of war horses. But in the following years, the small-scale battles at the border never stopped. Chanyu was cruel and vicious. He wanted to consume the war horses of the Tang army. For this, he did not hesitate to let his cavalrymen pay twice or even thrice the price. The royal court could replenish the war horses, but where could the Tang army replenish their war horses? The number of war horses of the Northern Battlefront Army decreased rapidly as time went by and the battles never stopped. Now, they were in a desperate situation. As a famous general in the Tang army, Hua Ying was extremely powerful in martial arts. In the Northern Battlefront Army, he was only second to General Su Qi in both experience and ability. He had over 10,000 cavalrymen and 3,000 heavy cavalrymen under his command. But now, 2,432 men with 2,432 war horses made up 2,432 cavalrymen, all the cavalrymen under his command. They were the last cavalrymen of the Northern Battlefront Army. Hua Ying accepted the military order and brought all the cavalrymen here to confront the Golden Tribe's cavalry from summer to now. That was equivalent to throwing all their hopes into this battle because the Tang army needed the grassland. They wanted to find hope. Of course, the Tang Empire would not have only these horses left. However, it was pointless to send horses from the south because the number was not enough to change the current situation. What made the Northern Battlefront Army even angrier was that the imperial court did not seem to have the same idea. Hua Ying stared at the wine bowl. There seemed to be a fire burning in his eyes. It was the Academy that decided to cede the Xiangwan Plain to the Golden Tribe Royal Court, and it was Ning Ke who promised that he would solve the problem of the war horses. However, years had passed, and the Tang army had been bleeding and dying on the grassland. He and his soldiers had been tortured like ghosts. Where were the horses? If you are lying to us, I will come back to Chong and ask you even if I die in the snow. He picked up the wine bowl and said to Ning Ke, looking to the south. At this moment, a warning came from outside the camp. At the same time, there was a fierce challenge. In the wind and snow, the voice was clear and fierce, echoing in the wilderness. Hua Ying looked back at the face in the wine bowl. It was a haggard face that was not as handsome as before. He suddenly smiled. With the help of his bodyguards, he carefully put on his armor and walked out of the tent. When he walked out of the tent, he was still in the camp. When he walked out again, the snowflakes fell on the armor, but they did not melt. Soon, the cracks were filled. The Tang army stood outside their own tents and looked at their commander in silence. Outside the camp, Hua Ying looked at the barbarian youth through the wind and snow. He said bitterly, "The general will definitely scold me." Of course, he remembered who the barbarian youth was. He was defeated by this inconspicuous youth on the grassland in the summer and had been injured ever since. No one knew when such a powerful cultivator appeared in the Golden Tribe royal court. If he was defeated by the infamous General Lebu, Hua Ing would understand. But he could not figure out where this youth came from and why he was so powerful. It was not until the rumor spread in the grassland that people realized that this young slave, Ada, was a gift from Hao Yin to the human world, just like Hungmu Liren from the divine halls of West Hill. He was a powerful cultivator bestowed by heaven. Hungmu Liren had an unimaginable position in the hearts of the followers of Hao Yin. If it did not live in the wilderness, his reputation would not be any weaker. After knowing the truth, Hua Ing realized that he had not lost unjustly. Hao Yin had truly abandoned the Tang Empire, just like how she had abandoned the Desolate 1,000 years ago. He would not be afraid because of this, but his state of mind was still affected. He looked into the distance. On the horizon, there was a magnificent mountain that divided the entire land into two parts. It was the Min Mountain and the Tianqi Mountain. Is it terrible to be abandoned by Hao Yin? Huang smiled. He reached his hand into the air and took the padao from the bodyguard. The cool sensation in his palm lifted his spirits. The barbarian youth was powerful and terrifying. Huang knew that he was no match for him. If he fought, he would die. There was no reason for him to do so. When two armies confronted each other, there was no reason for the commander to fight alone. On the battlefield, the brave would never win. No one could say anything if he chose to avoid the fight. However, on his way out of the camp, he saw the soldiers' expressions and eyes. He saw the exhaustion and the terrible tiredness. He saw the old horses wrapped in blankets like sick people. He knew that the morale of the Northern Battlefront Army was at an all-time low. If he chose to fight, even if he lost and died, it would still be beneficial for him. The Morning Army might not win, but could hold on until the situation changed. So he held the padao and walked to the other side of the snow. I will take your head and bury it with my tribe. Ada looked at Hua Ing and said emotionlessly, and one day, I will lead the warriors of the royal court to Chang and then kill that man. Hua Ing patted the snow on his armor and said, You might be able to kill me, but I don't plan to let you go back alive. You won't live to see Chang'an. When he said this, the second most powerful warrior of the Northern Battlefront Army looked calm. He was not confident that he could defeat Hao Yin's gift to the human world, but he was confident that he could survive. When a man was not afraid of death, he would not be afraid of fate. His fingers on the hilt slowly closed like iron. Snowflakes fell on it, but there was no sign of melting, because his hand was just that cold. From his body to the long and thin hilt, and then to the heavy black blade, an extremely cold and sharp aura was slowly released, and then suddenly increased. The snowflakes in the air were disturbed by this aura and shot to all directions, making the sound of breaking the air like sharp arrows. Ada expressionlessly drew out the machete on his waist. It was a precious saber given to him by Chanyu. It was extremely sharp, as bright as his eyes at this moment. Just like before every important battle, the young man started to pray silently, asking Tungri to give him the power to defeat all the enemies. The snowflakes in the air seemed to hear his prayer. They timidly slowed down and floated in the air. The remaining snow on the field gradually melted, revealing the remaining grass underneath. The snow melted and the grass appeared, but it was not full of vitality. On the contrary, it gave people a very gloomy feeling. Ada looked at Hua Ing in front of him. His eyes were as bright as gemstones and as sharp as blades. There was a look of contempt and pity. Then he took a step forward. He only took one step forward and then stopped. He felt something was wrong. He looked up at the snowy sky and suddenly felt endless sadness in his heart. His slightly blue lips slightly moved, as if he was moaning, Tungri. When the tribe was defeated, he was still young and did not know how to be sad. Later, when he worked hard for the nobles in the royal court, he did not have the time to be sad. When he was collecting dung, he did not have the strength to be sad. Later, he became a great young warrior and was far away from the sadness. But at this moment, the sadness was so strong that it instantly occupied his body and mind. He seemed to see his own death in the next moment. Why was it like this? He stopped looking at the sky and looked to somewhere far away in the south. He felt that someone was watching him. Although he was thousands of miles away and could not hear any sound, he had a strong feeling that the person was talking to him. As long as he took a step forward, he would die. Adah's dark and childish face was full of unwillingness and anger. If that person could really shoot him from thousands of miles away, why didn't he do it in the summer? What made him most angry was that he felt the person's undisguised arrogance. And in front of this arrogance, even Tungri remained silent. And he began to fear. A neigh came from the wind and snow. No one knew where it came from, but it was full of arrogance. Ada looked at the Tang camp, holding the machete, not knowing if he would take that step forward. Thousands of miles away in the south, snow was falling on the city wall. Ning Ke stood on top of the city wall with his back against the whole Chang. He looked at the direction of the distant wilderness and the invisible battlefield. The dark and heavy iron bow was placed on the brick in front of him. The array pestle of the god-stunning array was held tightly in his hand. His sense of perception spread around. It was his order for the Northern Battlefront Army to kill all the captives of the Golden Tribe Royal Court. He knew it would put a lot of pressure on the Northern Battlefront Army, but he did not care, because the way he talked to the world was not only the falling heads in the autumn rain, but also the box of iron arrows behind him. What was puzzling was that even with the help of Chang, and he could not see the entire world no matter how far he could see, the wilderness thousands of miles away was just a blurry gray image in his sense of perception. As long as the powerhouses of the Golden Tribe Royal Court were not stupid enough to light themselves up, it would be meaningless. But he still looked to the north, as if he could see those lights at any time and then send them to the underworld or the divine kingdom with an iron arrow. Or was the fire in the Academy's hand all the time? I wish you all a happy weekend. I suddenly feel that labor is really a happy thing. Chapter 1045. The string of the iron bow in front of Ning Ke was loose, but the string of the giant bow was pulled taut. Just like what happened in the field of wind and snow, there were confrontations everywhere and battles could break out at any time. No one knew when the end of the world would come. Ada was a devout follower chosen by Sang Sang and the most outstanding young powerhouse of the Golden Tribe Royal Court. That was why he could feel Ning Ke's gaze on the city wall of Chang and from thousands of miles away. Hamu Liren was in the same situation as him, but he could not feel it. Maybe because Ning Ke was not looking at him, or because there were too many gazes on him. The sacred sedan moved slowly on the streets of Yangzhou City. The beautiful sacred music kept ringing. The people of Qinghai Prefecture knelt on both sides of the street and looked at the sacred sedan with passion and humility. The passion and humility came from either piety or fear. Either way, it was what Hengmu wanted to see. That was all he wanted to see. Through the veil of the sacred sedan, Hengmu looked at the 7 masters of the clans of Qinghai Prefecture who knelt behind him. He thought about what they said when he summoned them. Hengmu smiled coldly and thought to himself, I don't need to worry about ants. No matter what you are thinking about, don't think about it anymore. The divine halls will help you think. What you need to do is to carry out the will of Haoyan. This was the only thing Hengmu Liren said to the masters. Then he waved his hand indifferently and drove them away as if they were ants. Surrounded by dozens of divine priests and more papal cavalrymen of the West Hill, he walked out of Yangguan City. He came from the south with the mighty navy of South Jin and the powerful cavalrymen of the divine halls. The unstable Qinghai Prefecture was soon stabilized by his scornful attitude and killing intent. The young people who were hiding in the dark and were ready to cooperate with the Tangs were also killed or escaped by the deacons of the divine halls. Now his sacred sedan had left Yangzhou City and was heading to the north. Chang and was in that direction. Chongming was also looking at Chang, but from a different direction. Chang and was in the west from Chengjing City, where the sun set. He was no longer the crown Prince Chongming who had been a hostage in Chang and for 10 years. Instead, he was the high and mighty emperor of the Yin kingdom. However, his feelings for that city had not changed at all. There is no nostalgia, no lament, only incomparable hatred and fear. Behind him, the imperial palace of the Yin Kingdom, which had been destroyed by the Tang army several years ago, was being rebuilt. With the war reparations from the Tang Empire, beautiful palaces were being rebuilt from the ruins. At this time, the capital of the Yin Kingdom was in full swing. From the officials to the people, everyone was very proud. But he was still afraid. He had lived in Chang, and for many years. He knew how powerful the Tang Empire was. He knew that the Tangs would never forget their hatred. He knew what Liu was thinking. He also knew that if the Tang Empire really recovered, then the Yin Empire would not be able to resist their cavalry. The palace that had just been rebuilt behind him would become a ruin in a short period of time, and Liu would definitely give him unforgettable revenge. 3 years ago, the Tang Empire rebuilt the Northeast Border Army. The general's mansion was still located in Tuyang City. Compared to the past, there seemed to be no change. But Chongming knew that the newly built Northeast Border Army only had one goal, and that was to destroy the Yin Kingdom. Chongming did not dare to hope that the Yin Kingdom could resist the Tang army with its weak national strength. He could only pin his hopes on the West Hill Divine Palace and his own brother. Because of this, he disregarded the opposition of his subjects and firmly carried out the orders of the West Hill Divine Palace. He searched the last of the food from his people's homes and kept sending it to the wilderness, to the nobles of the Left King's palace who had been enemies with him for generations. Only when the cavalry of the Left King's palace became stronger and stronger could they resist the desolate man's tribe further north. Only when the war broke out could they help the Yin Kingdom fight against the Tang Empire. Chongming had thought that even if the East King's palace could not become a threat to the Tang Empire in a short period of time, it could at least ensure that the Yin Kingdom could get rid of the shadow of the desolate man after he and his country had sacrificed so much. But who would have thought that the development of the situation would be far beyond his expectations? Why? Why could the desolate man's tribe survive until now, when they had been destroyed by the Divine Hall Coalition Army a few years ago, and they even seemed to be slowly recovering their strength? This was a question that troubled the Yin Kingdom's officials and made the Divine Hall extremely vigilant. As more information flowed back from the wilderness, they got the answer that was closest to the truth. There was a ghost. A ghost was floating in the wilderness. It was a small figure, but it was as terrifying as a devil. Neither the snow that filled the sky nor the yellow sand that devoured people could stop the ghost. The high priest of the Left King's palace, who had the most powerful Dharma power, died tragically by the Crescent Sea 2 years ago. Then, several other priests died mysteriously. Until now, no priest dared to walk out of the palace. Every once in a while, there would be horrible news of a cavalry squad being destroyed or a powerhouse in the army becoming a pile of flesh and blood from the depths of the grassland. People kept dying on the grassland, including the powerhouses from the West Hill Divine Palace who went to rescue them, and the fallen commanders that Long Qing brought to the palace could not get rid of the ghost's curse. Until now, there was still no living person who had seen the true face of the ghost. But the West Hill Divine Palace and the other countries had already confirmed who the ghost was. The ghost was a devil. Although she looked like a petite girl, she was undoubtedly the most terrifying and coldest devil in the world. She was not afraid to kill people. She killed people as if she was mowing grass. Her name was Yulian, or Lin Wu. She was Mr. Third of the Academy. She also had a more famous and more frightening identity. She was the current Grand Master of the Devil's Doctrine, the most mysterious 23-year cicada cultivation in the cultivation world. Even after the spring wind and rain and the emergence of powerhouses in the cultivation world, no one believed that a cultivator could change the outcome of a war. It was not until Yulian began to kill people in the wilderness, and she spent several years killing hundreds of powerhouses from Haotian Taoism, that people gradually believed that such a thing really happened. This was a matter that chilled one's heart. Chongming was very disappointed, and so was his body. He subconsciously tightened his collar and looked away from Chong and city to the depths of the wilderness. He found that it was even colder. The wind came from the wilderness. It was extremely cold, but there was a deep smell of blood in it. It was also snowing in the extreme west of the wilderness. The snow squeezed out from the lead-like heavy clouds and fell to the ground, gradually covering the messy footprints. There were horse hooves and human footprints. There were so many footprints that it was impossible to see clearly. They spread forward in the wilderness, and the sound of stepping on the snow seemed to tear the clouds apart. In response to the summons of the Xiankong Temple, Chan Yu of the Right Royal Palace ordered all tribes to form an expedition team of tens of thousands of cavalrymen. They braved the wind and snow to go to support. The Buddhism's sublime beings who once sat above the clouds and rarely paid attention to the affairs of the world had now fallen to the extent that they needed the help of ordinary believers. It was a little sad to think about it. However, the tens of thousands of cavalrymen might die in the wind and snow on the way. Who would pity them? Some of the snowflakes fell on the ground of the wilderness, and some fell under the ground. There was still a world under the ground. It was a dark giant sinkhole. It was daytime, and the snow reflected the light. Logically, the world should be bright, or at least brighter than usual. However, the world at the bottom of the giant sinkhole was gloomier than usual. It was like the night, and the picture was very blurry. The reason was that everywhere in the wilderness of the underground world was burning. The highland barley fields that never froze because of the hot spring were ignited. The woods beside the streams were ignited. The water wheel outside the giant sinkhole was ignited. The tents of the nobles were ignited. An inconspicuous monk temple at the foot of the Prajna Peak in the distance was gradually collapsing in the raging fire. A single spark could start a prairie fire. The serfs' uprising in the underground world that started a few years ago finally spread to all tribes and could no longer be extinguished. Beacon fires were everywhere in the Buddha kingdom. These fires brought blazing heat, burned gorgeous gold wares, and brought dirty black smoke, covering the sacred yellow temples among the peaks. The sounds of killing were everywhere in the wilderness. These cries from the deepest part of the soul could overwhelm the pious chanting of sutras and ignore the call of the morning bell. The beacon fires and the sounds of killing had not yet affected the giant peak transformed from the body of Buddha. The treasure mountain was unharmed, and the monks in the mountain had gradually become cold-hearted. That was why they ordered the right royal court to rush to help. The most important reason for this was that there was a ghost in the underground world. The ghost was the shadow of an iron sword, and it never stopped moving between the dirty and the sacred. Junimo was fighting. He had been injured, badly injured, but he never stopped waving the iron sword. He had been fighting for a long time without sleep and rest for several years. He would not stop until he tore apart the light of Buddha and led the people out of hell. The capital of the kingdom of Song was next to the sea. It was early winter, but it was still relatively warm. Snowflakes fell from the sky and would melt after being blown by the sea breeze. It was hard to attract people's attention. Just like the man who was preaching in front of the square, he wore a very ordinary divine robe and held a West Hill scripture. He was no different from an ordinary divine priest. However, the content of his preaching was obviously different from that of the divine priests of the West Hill Divine Palace. Yisu looked at the dense crowd of believers and said, "Each of us has sinned. We have committed different sins, so we need to atone for our sins. If we want to atone for our sins, should we pin our hopes on the divine kingdom or ourselves? The great Hao Yin will naturally respond to our call. But what have you and I ever done? Don't say that you can't do anything. It's even more unimaginable that you can't change the world. The world is made up of countless of us. As long as we can change ourselves, we can actually change the world, and it's the most fundamental change. We are seeing a man change a war and a man change tens of thousands of years of injustice. So why can't we change the world and change ourselves? Chapter 1046. The streets and alleys around the square of the capital of the Kingdom of Song were dead silent. Occasionally, heavy breathing could be heard, but it was not the breathing of humans, but the snorting of war horses. Someone's preaching voice came from afar. Due to the distance, the voice sounded a bit erratic, as if it came from God. The complete meaning could not be heard, but some strange words such as woman, stone, sin, biscuit, and salt. Soon, they were blown away by the snorting of the war horses and melted into the cold winter air, leaving no trace. Was there really no trace? Of course not. When the voice entered people's ears, it would leave traces in their hearts. The divine priests and deacons of the divine halls of West Hill hiding in the streets and alleys around the square, as well as the cavalrymen of the kingdom of song holding sharp weapons, all had a strange look on their faces. The sound of breathing gradually became heavier. Hundreds of war horses on standby, thousands of divine priests, deacons, and soldiers who were ready to attack at any time gradually converged into thunder in the quiet streets. According to the plan of the divine halls of West Hill, these heavily armed people would rush out of the streets and alleys and rush to the peaceful square. They would kill those traitors with their weapons and cut that preacher into pieces, setting off the first great climax of the destruction of a new stream. However, those divine priests, indifferent deacons, and pale-faced cavalrymen of the kingdom of song actually did not understand why so many devout followers of Hao Yin would continue to listen to that blasphemer's preaching. Why were the followers of a new stream standing or sitting while listening to that preaching? Shouldn't they be kneeling? Why? Finally, the order came from the Taoist Hall. With the heavy sound of the city gate closing, the capital of the kingdom of song became a dead city. No one could leave. Those who dared to ignore the ban of the divine halls and change their faith or support, or even sympathize with the new stream would be arrested. As for the preachers of a new stream, those blasphemers, they would be killed immediately. The wind blowing from the coastline also gradually became colder, unable to blow the snowflakes away. The snow on the streets also stopped melting and gradually accumulated. With the orderly and terrifying footsteps, the city gradually turned into a clean and austere white. Everyone knew that the white snow would soon be dyed red with blood. The iron spears clashed against the armors, the horses breathed heavily, and the knights stared at them coldly. The smell of metal in the air gradually turned into the smell of blood. Countless cries of shock and fear were heard around the square. People knew that the divine halls would not allow the new stream to continue to spread, but they did not expect that the battle of faith would be so bloody from the very beginning. Those who sympathized with the new stream were driven to a corner by the deacons and cavalrymen of the divine halls of West Hill. The sound of iron rods hitting on flesh and blood could be heard everywhere, and the screams of the people could be heard everywhere. Naturally, most of all, the sound of crying was heard. Cries of fear and despair. Blood was spilling in the crowd. Cold rebukes were heard constantly. The iron spears and the blades kept shining, and then there was a brighter light. It was the sword light. In the crowd, more than 20 disciples of the Sword Garret of South Jin Kingdom drew their swords at the same time. They inherited the swords of Liu Bai and Liu Yiqing and cut the anger that descended on the human world with an indomitable momentum. The anger of the divine halls slightly subsided. However, with the continuous influx of cavalrymen and more powerful Taoism cultivators joining the battle, the scene became more and more chaotic. 3 commanders of the cavalrymen of divine halls led their subordinates and broke through the blockade of the disciples of the Sword Garret. They rushed into the depths of the square. They did not pay attention to the crying followers of the new stream, but only to the calm man on the platform. As long as they could kill the blasphemer, who would continue to believe in those absurd and evil theories. Looking at the bleeding people, the crying mothers holding their children in their arms, and the white-haired old men who were full of fear, Yisu showed deep sorrow in his eyes. However, it was strange that he also felt pity and sorrow for the cavalrymen of divine halls who were rushing toward him. Chun Pippi walked onto the platform and was ready to leave with his senior brother. They had experienced such things many times during their escape from the South Jin Kingdom. Today seems to be the last day. Yisu reached out and patted him on the shoulder, signaling him not to pack in a hurry. Then he looked up at the falling snow and said, "But Why did the headmaster do this? During the escape, the carefree young man's temperament and the flesh on his body gradually disappeared. Chun Pippi said, "It's not the last until the last." His expression was so serious. His eyes were full of exhaustion, but there was no hesitation in the depths of exhaustion. Only this sentence showed that he was still the old Chun Pippi. He believed in what was right and was willing to work hard for it. Most importantly, what made Ning Ke admire him the most was that he was still optimistic in the face of a desperate situation. It's different. Yisu no longer looked at the sky. He looked at the increasing number of cavalrymen around the square and those powerful Haotian Taoism powerhouses. He said calmly, "Today's battle array is too big. These people can't stop us from leaving." Chun Pippi walked to him and looked at the approaching cavalry commanders and the murderous cavalrymen of Divine Halls. He said, "They're going to die soon." A few years ago, he was seriously injured and his ocean of chi and mountain of snow was locked by Sang Sang. He was already a useless man and was no match for any of the powerhouses of Divine Halls here today. But he said it calmly and matter-of-factly. Of course, it was the Academy's matter-of-factly. However, after saying this, his expression changed slightly, because he saw the crowd gradually separate and a girl was slowly walking toward the wooden platform. She was Xiaoyu from the South Sea, his former fiancée. The once proud and powerful girl from the South Sea was still powerful, but her pride had completely sunk into her bones. She wore a divine robe, and her aura was calm and cold. She was a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state. Those disciples of the sword Garrett could not stop her. No matter how hard the sword was, it would turn into scrap iron when it met her hands. The girl from the South Sea stopped when she was 200 feet away. She quietly watched the 3 cavalrymen of Divine Halls leading the unstoppable cavalrymen forward. She looked at Yi Su with a complicated expression. There was admiration, fear, hatred, and contempt in her eyes. She knew that one of the most outstanding traitors in the history of Haotian Taoism was going to die soon. She looked at Chun Pippi with a complicated expression, but no one could tell what she was thinking. A cavalry commander rode to the front of the platform. His momentum was as fast as thunder. His blade broke through the air and fell. The talisman lines on the blade suddenly lit up and slashed down with endless chi of heaven and earth. If it had been in the past, the 2 men would have been able to take it easily or even ignore it. Yisu and Chun Pippi were the most famous names in Haotian Taoism in the past 20 years. Neither Yi Hongyu nor Long Qing were qualified to be mentioned in the same breath as them. These 2 men were the real geniuses of Haotian Taoism. But now they had betrayed Haotian Taoism. Maybe it was for this reason that Haotian took away all their cultivation. That was what the cavalry commander thought. He had the cultivation of the upper see-through state. With the help of the talisman on his saber already had the power of the knowing destiny state. How could he not be able to kill 2 disabled people? At this moment, an iron cudgel flew from the sky like a hill. The cavalry commander's saber hit the hill. The warhorse couldn't stop at all, so his body hit the hill as well. The hill was made of iron and could not be moved. Anyone who tried to hit it would be turned into powder. The cavalry commander's blade turned into powder, his body turned into powder, and his warhorse also turned into powder. The powder with a metallic luster and the blood-red meat powder spread on the square with a bang. They mixed together and began to emit a strange luster. The noisy and chaotic battlefield suddenly became quiet at this moment. The cavalrymen of Divine Hall who were charging toward the platform pulled the reins desperately. The deacons who were fighting stopped in shock and looked toward the source of the sound. The dust gradually settled and the snow fell again. No matter what kind of powder it was, once it fell on the ground and mixed with the snow, it could not be seen anymore. The sight became clear and a petite figure appeared. The animal's skin slightly shivered in the cold wind, just like the strands of hair on her cheeks. She pulled out the iron cudgel from the ground and looked at the girl from the South Sea in front of her. Tang Xiaodang. Xiaoyu looked at the figure and said, there seemed to be flames burning between her lips and teeth. Then she looked at Chin Pippi with deep eyes full of sadness and anger. Tang Xiaodang looked at her and said seriously, "If you dare to look at him like this again, I will definitely dig your eyes out." Xiao Yu's voice was extremely cold. "Why?" Tang Xiaodang said, "I said a few years ago on Peach Mountain that he is my man." She said it as if it was a matter of course, just like what Chin Pippi had said before. Of course, it was still a matter of course for the Academy. Although he came from Taoism and had the most noble and talented bloodline, and she came from the Devil's Doctrine and had the most evil and domineering bloodline, they were both from the Academy after all. There was a dead silence on the square. Only the groans of the wounded and the cries of the dead could be heard. Looking at Chin Pippi and Tang Xiaodang standing together, the girl from the South Sea gradually calmed down and a faint self-deprecating expression appeared in her eyes. "What's the point of dying together? The Abbey Dean is still waiting for you on Peach Mountain," she asked Chin Pippi. Chin Pippi explained seriously. "Ning Ke once said that when the golden wind and the jade dew meet, it is better than countless things in the world. I am the golden wind, and she is the jade dew." Xiao Yu was slightly stunned and said sadly, "It is indeed a good poem." Chin Pippi looked at her and said with a smile, "Actually, what he said next is more in line with what I want. He said that what he wants is to last forever, forever. So today can't be our last day. You should know whose will it is. My father? I don't think his will necessarily be carried out. This is Hao Yan's world. The Abbey Dean carries out Hao Yan's will. No one can change it. I am his son, and senior brother is his disciple. We may not be able to change him, but I think there is someone in this world who can." "Who?" Ning Quebec Chin Pippi said very seriously. "That guy. Even Hao Yan is not his match. How can my father be his match? Ning Ke is far away in Chong, and he doesn't dare to leave the city, so he can't change what happened here today." Xiao Yu looked at him quietly and then raised her right hand. The wide sleeves of her divine robe slowly fell down, revealing her smooth and white arm. It was quite beautiful. Tang Xiaodang looked at Chin Pippi and said, "Don't look." Chin Pippi widened his eyes and said, "I'm just a little shocked. Isn't her family always dark? Why are they so pale now?" She said it when she shouldn't have said it, because she was nervous. Xiao Yu raised her right arm, and the cavalrymen of the divine halls of West Hill were ready to attack again. Chin Pippi said he believed that Ning Ke could change everything, but he didn't really believe it. He was just bragging out of habit and trying to save his friend's face. He looked at Yi Su and confirmed a fact. "Senior brother, it seems that you have really achieved Taoism. Why do you say that?" "Because you can predict the future." "What?" "You just said this is the last day." Yi Su smiled and said, "This is my last day." Chin Pippi said, "Then it must be mine." Judging from the situation, Tang Xiaodang was not afraid of Xiao Yu. The disciples of the Sword Garret were still fighting fiercely and should be able to protect them. But the two brothers knew that this was really the last day, because this was the Abbey Dean's will. That man was the teacher he respected the most, his father. They knew very well how powerful and terrifying that man was. Even though he was a cripple with his ocean of chi and mountain of snow destroyed like the two of them, he could still overturn the world with a single thought. The Abbey Dean would never make a mistake except when facing the headmaster of the academy. There were definitely more people in the Kingdom of Song today. There must be others who were preparing for the final harvest. The atmosphere was depressing at first, but then it became gloomy and horrible with Chin Pippi's silence and the moans of the wounded. Even the falling snow slowed down a bit. "We ourselves are the path, the truth, and life." Yi Su looked at the confused and painful followers and said slowly, "Follow your own path, and you will walk out of the dark valley and get the greatest joy." As he said this, the snow suddenly fell. A crack appeared in the snowy clouds above the capital of the Song Kingdom. Sunlight shone down and fell on him, gilding him with a layer of gold. The followers of the new stream were shocked speechless and then knelt down. The path, the truth, and life. There was a small courtyard between several inconspicuous buildings. Prince Long Qing stood in the courtyard with his hands clasped behind his back. He listened to the voices coming from outside the wall and seemed to be thinking. There were dozens of piles of firewood on the ground behind him. They were very dry and gave people a feeling of holiness. Not a single snowflake dared to fall on them. The flames of the firewood should be very high. He actually wrote it. What a surprise. Chapter 1047. The situation in the world was extremely tense. On the border of the Tang Empire, in the capital of the Song Empire, and at the bottom of the giant sinkhole, there were confrontations everywhere. Wars were on the verge of breaking out. Some had already started, while others had never stopped. The people in the world pinned their last hope on the envoys sent by the Tang Empire, hoping that they could reach an agreement with the divine halls of West Hill. The two envoys were just ordinary people who did not know how to cultivate, let alone powerful cultivators in the knowing destiny state. But at this moment, they were the most important people in the world. There were two kinds of people who loved peace. One was afraid of war, and the other was worried that they could not win, so they loved peace temporarily. Chu Yuxian and Qinshi belonged to this kind of people. They did not know that they were carrying the burden of the world, but they had the same idea as the world. They also wanted to reach an agreement with the divine halls of West Hill. However, the problem was that they could not see the two people they wanted and had to see. What made them even more terrified was that if the two people wanted to see each other, they would be able to even if they were in the divine halls of West Hill. But they could not see each other now, which seemed to be a bad sign. Did no one want to know what Ning Ke was going to say to them? Not being able to see each other was the source of all anxiety. Chu Yuxian and Qinshi were very anxious. They pondered in silence in the Revelation Institute, but they could not find a way to complete the task. Today, it was an ordinary divine priest in a brown robe who came to the Revelation Institute to meet them. Judging from his clothes and extravagance, this divine priest obviously had a very low status on the Peach Mountain. In fact, these days, the divine halls were getting colder and colder. After Chu Yuxian and Qinshi refused to talk to Zhao Nanhai, the divine priests who talked to them became lower and lower in rank. I'm just a nobody, so I'm not the one you want to see. The divine priest in a brown robe looked at the two and said, "So who do you want to see?" Judging from this question, the divine halls of West Hill were getting impatient or less curious. They even want to tear the window paper. At this point, it was meaningless to hide. It was better to have a try, even though it might be in vain. Chu Yuxian thought for a while, looked at the divine priest in a brown robe, and said seriously, "We want to see Hong Yu very much." The brown-robed priest was not surprised and asked with a smile, "Why?" When they were almost assassinated in Qinghua Prefecture, Chu Yuxian and Qinshi had already guessed what Gu Chang'e had guessed. Therefore, they were not surprised that Gu Chang'e was not surprised. The Taoist sect has no faith. To be precise, Mr. 13 only believes in the divine priest of judgment. All right, that's a more reasonable explanation. The brown-robed cleric calmly said, "I will report your thoughts. As for whether or not they will make arrangements, that is not something I am responsible for." After saying this, the people from the Divine Hall left the Revelation Institute. Just like this sentence, Chu Yuxian and Qinshi were irresponsibly forgotten again until dusk. Standing on the stone steps in front of the Revelation Institute, Qinshi looked at the fallen peach blossoms and imagined the three arrays hidden in the mountain path and peach bushes. He said, "Even if the Divine Hall can resist my army, everyone outside the array will be killed by Mr. First." Chu Yuxian asked, "So you are puzzled by the Divine Hall's reaction?" "No, what I don't understand is the attitude of the Academy." Chen 7 shook his head and said, "Why is Ning Ke in such a hurry to negotiate with Taoism? What is he afraid of?" The sun was setting, and the twilight was as red as blood. The two were silent with a heavy heart. At this moment, they finally received a reply from the Divine Hall, which was a congratulation. Tomorrow morning, the Hierarch Lord would summon them in person. The Divine Hall had arranged a very grand ceremony for this negotiation, and the Divine Priest of Judgment whom they wanted to meet would also be there. After the banquet, Chu Yuxian and Chen 7 returned to their room and looked at each other without saying a word. just like when they were looking at the peach blossoms in the twilight. Their hearts were still heavy. Tomorrow, the hierarch lord and thousands of divine priests and deacons would be in the divine hall. How could they talk to Yi Hong Yu in private in front of so many people? Or, we don't have to talk in private, Chen Seven suddenly said. Chu Yuxian was confused and asked, "What do you mean?" After a moment of silence, Chen Seven said, "We are only responsible for telling Ning Kei's words to her, no matter what the occasion is, as long as she can hear it." Hearing this, Chu Yuxian was silent for a long time, and his face turned pale. He murmured to himself, "It's better not to see each other." Meeting in front of thousands of people and saying those words meant that he was courting death. He raised his head, looked at Qin Shi, and said with a sigh, "You are really cruel." Ning Kei chose them to pass the message to the Divine Hall because of Chun Vii's plan and Chu Yoxian's unscrupulous behavior. But now it seemed that Qin Seven was better at cruel means. Just as Chu Yuxian said, he was cruel to both others and himself. Qin Seven said, "If thousands of people heard those words, it might be more effective." Chu Yoxian's mood was a bit complicated. How could he be happy when he saw himself running on the road of death? But he had already been aware of this when he left Chang'an. So he was still calm, even though his face was pale. Since we have to die after saying those words, maybe we should try to see that person first. Chu Yuxian walked to the window and said while looking at the cliff plateau halfway up the Peach Mountain, which looked like it was cut by a knife and axe, and at the inconspicuous stone houses in the darkness. Qin Seven walked to him and said with a frown, "It's hard to get there." Chu Yuxian glanced at him and said bitterly, "Harder than death." It was a silent night. Both of them were silent and said goodbye to the past. So when they woke up in the morning, they were not in good spirits, especially Chu Yuxian, who had two very deep dark circles under his eyes, which looked both funny and depressing. "It's a happy funeral." Chu Yuxian comforted himself. Led by the deacon of the Divine Hall, the two left the Revelation Institute and walked up the stone steps to the Peach Mountain. Peach blossoms were falling on the green hillside, and the snow that had fallen a few days ago had accumulated on it, which made it very beautiful. The bluestone steps were wet with dew, which was even more striking in the fragrant snow. It didn't take long before they saw the white Divine Hall on the top of the mountain. The morning light shone on it, and the holy aura was spreading. Chu Yuxian and Chun Seven looked at each other, and suddenly turned around and ran to somewhere on the cliff plateau. Stepping on the hard stone steps, they breathed as fast as the mountain wind. They ignored the deacon's panicked cries and the cavalrymen of the Divine Hall who were chasing after them. They swung their arms and opened their mouths and ran desperately to the depth of the cliff plateau. It was really a mad dash that burned their lives. The two people, who were already prepared to die, burst forth with an unprecedented speed in this early morning. They were like two fleeing rabbits, passing through the grass, and even their figures became blurred with a whooshing sound. The Divine Hall's reaction was a little slow. The deacon and the cavalrymen didn't catch up until they reached the middle of the cliff plateau. But somehow, they didn't dare to take another step forward. Zhao Nanhai floated down from the top of the Peach Mountain. Looking at the two figures on the cliff plateau, he was expressionless, but he was in a strange mood. If the person in the stone house at the end of the cliff plateau didn't want to see him, the two Tangs wouldn't be able to run here even if they really did burn their lives. Why did he want to see him? Running to the stone houses at the end of the cliff plateau, Chu Yuxian and Chun Seven were panting and holding their waists. They almost couldn't stand up straight and felt that their lungs were about to explode. The Divine Hall didn't send anyone to chase them here, maybe because they were afraid or for some other reasons. It was actually the result of their calculation, so it was not a surprise. The person in the stone house was really willing to see them, because even he wanted to know what Ning Kei was going to say. Chu Yuxian wiped the sweat off his forehead and thought proudly. With a light sound, the door of the stone house was pushed open, and a middle-aged priest came out. The middle-aged Taoist was wearing an ordinary Taoist robe, and his appearance was also very ordinary. There is nothing outstanding about his appearance or his aura, no matter how one looked at it. This Taoist should not and could not be an ordinary person, but he had been ordinary his whole life, which was very unusual. Chu Yuxian knew that this was not the person he was looking for, but he still looked extremely respectful. His hands were even trembling when he was tidying up his clothes. The middle-aged priest looked at him and said with a gentle smile, "You have to come here to see me. What do you want to say or do?" What did Chu Yuxian want to do? He knelt down to the middle-aged priest and the person in the stone house without hesitation and said humbly, "Chu Yuxian wants to hear a story, Taoist master." The middle-aged priest looked at him quietly, as if he didn't expect that Chu Yuxian would kneel down so naturally and decisively. He didn't even give himself a chance to stop him. Chu Yuxian looked calm and naturally knelt down. Ningke chose them to negotiate with Taoism because of Chun Vii's wisdom and bravery. As for Chu Yuxian, he had no bottom line. The middle-aged priest asked with a smile, "What story?" Since Chu Yuxian and Chun Seven could come to the stone house, it meant that they had permission. The person in the stone house wanted to hear it, whether it was a story or a fable. Chu Yuxian said respectfully, "The story happened in a world very similar to our world. In that world, there was a religion very similar to Taoism. The god of that religion was called God, who was omniscient and omnipotent. As the morning light faded, Chu Yuxian's mouth became drier and drier, and his voice became hoarse. Finally, he told a long story briefly. The middle-aged priest looked at him quietly, and then looked back at the stone house. Finally, he looked at the sky and clouds outside the cliff yard and said, "It is indeed a long story. The past and present of Christianity, the rise of Protestantism, and the retelling of history, no matter how simple it was bound to be long. 2,000 years of history were condensed into a story. Looking back at the end of the story, those bloody religious wars were indeed a bit ridiculous." Chu Yuxian bowed his head respectfully. The middle-aged priest thought about the beginning and ending of the story, the cooperation and disputes between the royal family and the believers, and the distribution of interests, and found the story more and more interesting. "I heard that Mr. 13 told many stories to Hao Yin. I don't know whether he has told this story or not, but at least it proves that he is a good storyteller," the middle-aged priest said. He knew that it was a story told by Ning Quebec. Then he stepped aside, and the door of the stone house appeared directly in front of Chu Yuxian and Qinchi. This story was just the beginning of the conversation. Ning Ke used such a grand story as a prelude, and even the middle-aged priest began to wonder what he was going to say. Looking at the closed door of the stone house, Chu Yuxian's face became paler and paler, and Qinchi also became short of breath. The man in the house had a very different status and meaning to the believers of Hao Yin in the world. Even they couldn't bear it. The middle-aged priest said, "What do you want to say? Just say it." Chu Yuxian became more humble, and his forehead seemed to be pressed into the ground of the cliff plateau. However, what he said next in a trembling voice was so rebellious. "God is dead, and so will Hao Yin. So please think more about the things in the human world. The story of the religious reformation, whether it was told by Ning Ke or done by Yi Su, can't be written in tens of thousands of words. So I have to keep it simple. It's enough for you to convince yourselves that you have already seen the story. If you really want to read it, you can just read some related books. Jiang Yi is not a religious novel, so you have to make way for him. Besides, in the story of Jiang Yi, I have to rely on my energy, qi, and spirit to break through, because spiritual temperament is the most important to the end. Now I'm not in good health and spirit, so I have to fight hard. Only the one with the knife can win. But I won't pay much attention to the structure of the sentences, because too much thinking will really affect the temperament. Even a person with a temperament like me can't do that." Chapter 1048. God was dead. Hao Yin would die too. The first sentence had once resounded like thunder in a certain world, shattering the dark sky and waking up countless ignorant people. The latter sentence should have had a similar effect when it appeared in this world. Unfortunately, only 4 people heard it when it first appeared. The only thing that made it less regretful was that the person in the stone house heard it. The story Chu Yuxian told was Ning Kei's story. He didn't even know what the story was about, but he recited it very carefully according to Ning Kei's instructions and didn't miss a word. After hearing the story, the middle-aged Taoist sighed with emotion. When he heard the last 2 sentences, his expression finally changed, but the stone house was still quiet. Chu Yuxian was prepared for this. He suppressed his uneasiness and continued to repeat Ning Kei's words, regardless of the other person's reaction. Those were the words Ning Kei wanted to say to the world and the person in the stone house. It's better to make progress together than to be destroyed together. There is no eternity in the world. Before Hao Ian appeared, there was no Hao Ian. Then why can't there be Hao Ian? Before Hao Ian, there was Taoism. Taoism wanted to protect the world, so there was Hao Ian. So the academy and Taoism should be the same. Chu Yuxian lowered his head as he spoke. His voice was getting lower and lower because he vaguely understood what Ning Kei meant. He felt that Ning Kei's words were too shameless. As the repeater, he couldn't take it for granted like before. Sweat dripped from his forehead and fell on the ground in front of the stone house, but it didn't splash because it was too close to the house. Since we are the same, why do we have to fight to the death? For 1,000 years, the Abbey Dean had been the strongest in Hao Ian Taoism. However, Hao Ian had to die, so Hao Ian Taoism had to choose a new path. Such a great change had never happened in 1,000 years, and only a wise man like the Abbey Dean could handle it. Even if you have reservations, why can't you wait for 2 more years? Yi Su is your student. If he becomes a sage, you will be the sacred teacher. Chun Pippi is your son. If he becomes a sage, you will be the sacred father. When Taoism embarks on a new path, you will be the sacred teacher, sacred father, and sacred lord. Why can't the 3 sages be one? It was very quiet on the plateau, except for the mountain wind and Chu Yuxian's voice. No one in the stone house agreed or disagreed, but just listened quietly. Chu Yuxian's voice was getting lower and lower, but his words were getting smoother and smoother. In the end, he even added his own words subconsciously. One is your most promising student, and the other is your biological son. Dao sect, isn't it actually your family's business? We're all family. Can't we just talk it out? After saying this, Sage Chu Yukai found that he had said too much. His face instantly became paler, but his sweat suddenly stopped. He felt that the wind in the cliff was a little cold. The next moment, he found that he was still alive, and he could not help but feel lucky. He decided that if he could go to the Divine Hall later, he would keep his mouth shut and let Qinshi do all the talking. After listening to Ning Kei's words, the stone house was still quiet. The middle-aged Taoist waved his hand and signaled Chu Yuxian and Qinshi to leave the plateau. The 2 had completed their task, so they did not dare to stay any longer. They retreated toward the mountain path like restless rabbits. With a squeak, the door of the stone house was opened again, and an ordinary wheelchair slowly rolled out. An old man was sitting in the wheelchair, covered with a gray blanket. The man in the wheelchair had lived for more than 1,000 years. According to the time, he was already old, but in fact, when he occasionally appeared in the human world, he did not look old. Until the battle in Chang, and when he was sealed by Hao Ian in his snow mountain and ocean of qi, he aged at a speed visible to the naked eye. His hair turned white, and his eyebrows became softer and softer. But no matter how old he was, even if he was now a cripple, as long as he was alive, he could hold Taoism tightly in his hand, and he was the most terrifying opponent of the academy. In Ning Kei's eyes, the Abbey Dean was far more important than the drunkard and the butcher. It was not because of the unimaginable divine sense that the Abbey Dean had shown, but because he was the Abbey Dean. The human world belonged to the headmaster of the academy and the headmaster of the academy. But the Abbey Dean had always been there. This fact itself proved many things. The middle-aged Taoist pushed the wheelchair to the edge of the cliff. The Abbey Dean quietly looked at the flowing clouds outside the cliff and the remaining snow in the Green Mountains. He said slowly, Ning Ke has been trapped in Chang for half a year. Many people think that he did nothing but repeat what he did last time. But in fact, he has been thinking, and this is what he has done. Yes, Ning Ke had been thinking. He had been thinking about how to solve the problems in the human world, and then solve the problems in the divine kingdom. Finally, he came to the conclusion that to solve the problems in the human world, he had to convince the Abidine. Not to defeat or kill the Abidine, but to convince him. He believed that the Abidine could be convinced, because the Abidine was not the drunkard or the butcher, nor was he a rotten monster tortured by the obsession of existence. In his eyes, the Abidine was a man who had broken away from the vulgar taste, a man with high aesthetic standards, and a man with a strong heart. In other words, he thought that the Abidine was very similar to the headmaster, which was a great compliment. Through the teachings of the headmaster of the academy, Ning Ke had lived in the Buddha's chessboard with Sang Sang for countless years, and had a much deeper understanding of faith than before. He knew the origin of Taoism and Haoyin. Therefore, he was sure that the Abidine was not one of those foolish women who cried bitterly at the sight of the divine light. The Abidine's piety was not in Haoyin, but in his belief. That belief was the biggest secret of Taoism since ancient times. Haoyin guarded the world. The world was the root, and it was what Taoism wanted to protect. Whether it was the gambler who founded Taoism or the Abidine who ruled Taoism, Haoyin did not have the innate divinity in their hearts. Therefore, Ning Ke tried his best to tell the Abidine the story in the last two sentences. He knew that the Abidine did not need him to remind him, but he wanted to remind him. When God died, Haoyin could also die. In that world, there was the new stream, and Taoism could also embark on a new path. The old world waved goodbye, and the new world appeared. As long as Taoism took the initiative to embrace this trend, it could still have its own position in the new world. Taoism could still protect the world, but in a different way. Ning Ke wanted to remind him that the world itself was much more important than Haoyin. This was not only the Academy's view, but also the most essential belief of Taoism. Then why couldn't the Academy and Taoism be on the same path? Ning Ke chose the Abidine to talk to because he knew that the Abidine could understand him. He knew that the Abidine was wise enough, and the Abidine was a truly great man. Only a truly great man could make such a great decision. The headmaster of the academy is a great man to have such a student. The Abidine said calmly, Ning Ke can see through the foundation of Taoism and see through my belief. He is also a great man. The middle-aged priest was moved because the Abidine spoke highly of Ning Ke, and also because the Abidine had vaguely admitted his true thoughts. The Abidine looked out of the cliff and remained silent for a long time. The middle-aged priest's hands trembled slightly on the wheelchair. Even he felt extremely nervous at this moment, because what was going to happen next would definitely change the fate of the entire human world and even the Haoyin divine kingdom. There were many clouds outside the cliff. The white clouds floated everywhere like the waves on the water. They seemed to come and go at will, but they were actually shaped by the wind and attracted by the earth. The Abidine looked at the clouds and said calmly, unfortunately, he still doesn't understand himself. Chu Yuxian didn't understand either. Though he was a storyteller, he was no different from a parrot. He didn't know who God was, what the crusade was, what was the relationship between that religion and Taoism, and what was Ning Ke trying to say to the Abidine. How could Haoyin die? After leaving the cliff plateau, Zhao Nanhai and dozens of cavalrymen of the divine halls were waiting for them. The situation was a bit tense, but Chu Yuxian was not afraid. He pointed at the small stone houses and said, I can get there, so it's not a mistake. I can come back alive, so you can't kill me. Zhao Nanhai looked at the small stone houses in silence. No one knew what he was thinking, but he did nothing in the end. He led Chu Yuxian and Qinshi to the top of the peak. The white Taoist temple at the top of the Peach Mountain was the main hall of the divine halls of West Hill, the top building of Haoyin Taoism in the human world, and also the place for the negotiation. The floor of the divine hall was paved with smooth stone bricks, like a bronze mirror, reflecting the sunlight coming in from all directions. It also looked like it was paved with gold. The inside of the hall was spacious, and the walls were engraved with religious murals. Gems were inlaid everywhere, as if the wealth of the whole world was gathered here, and it was extremely solemn and sacred. Thousands of divine priests and deacons stood in the divine hall in a neat line. No one spoke, and no sound could be heard. It was like a silent ocean. Chu Yuxian and Qinshi walked in the crowd, as if they were walking in the ocean. They always felt that there was a terrifying storm hidden in the silent crowd. After walking for a long time, they finally arrived in front of the high platform in the deepest part of the divine temple. On the platform, there was a light screen that looked like a waterfall. On the screen, there was an extremely tall, godlike figure. That figure's voice was like thunder, and it had a terrifying divine might. The tall figure used to be called the most mysterious person in the cultivation world, together with the Devil's Doctrine's 23-year cicada cultivation. However, after that battle, he was seriously injured by Yu Lian and could no longer maintain his image. During the Right to Light, he was shot by Ning Ke, which made his position in the hearts of Hao Ian's believers in the world plummet. But he was, after all, the hierarch of the divine halls of West Hill, a peerless powerhouse who had surpassed the 5 states and successfully reached the Tianqi state. He was also recognized by the Abbey Dean as the leader of Haoyan Taoism. Chu Yuxian and Qinshi maintained enough respect for the tall figure. They were meticulous in saluting and worshiping, and there was no fault to be found. But to be honest, even the slowest divine priest could tell that their attention was not on the hierarch behind the light curtain, but on the inconspicuous chair under the high platform. The chair was not carved from a whole piece of South Sea black jade, but because the woman was sitting in the chair quietly, the ordinary chair became the seat of heavenly black jade. She sat there with her eyes closed, and the world around her became a sea of blood. Because she was wearing a blood-red robe, she had the most beautiful and coldest face in the world. She was the inviolable great divine priest of judgment, and she was the real powerhouse of Haoyan Taoism. Yi Hongyu, the great divine priest of judgment, was the one Ning Ke wanted to talk to, and also the one Chu Yuxian and Qinshi wanted to meet. Today, they finally met. Chu Yuxian and Qinshi were in a strange silence. As I said last night, it was better not to see her. In front of thousands of divine priests and deacons, as well as the hierarch of the divine halls of West Hill, how could they avoid Yi Hongyu's gaze and let her hear Ning Ke's words? The ceremony in the divine hall had entered the procedure of praising. There was not much time left for Chu Yuxian and Qinshi. Whether the negotiation between the Tang Empire and the divine hall could continue or not, they would leave Peach Mountain soon, and that sentence was still hidden in their hearts. Chu Yuxian looked at Qinshi and thought of the method he mentioned last night. He felt his lips and tongue were dry, and he murmured, "Are we really going to do this?" Qinshi stared at Yi Hongyu and said, "What else can we do?" Chu Yuxian was silent for a while, and finally summoned up the courage to take 2 steps forward with difficulty, attracting the attention of the people in the hall. Then he coughed and interrupted a red-robed divine priest. "We have something to talk about." Because of nervousness, he looked at the people in the divine hall and said in a hoarse voice, "We have come with the will of peace. Shouldn't you let us talk?" Thousands of divine priests and deacons in the hall looked at him expressionlessly. Their red, purple, and black robes were like the sea of different colors, silently but blowing on his face, and became a kind of pressure that made Chu Yuxian feel difficult to breathe. At the same time, Qinshi also took a step forward. The atmosphere in the hall became even more tense and depressing. But Qinshi seemed to feel nothing. He looked at the ordinary chair in the distance and the sea of blood, and said calmly and firmly, "Would you like to listen?" The negotiation was a joke. If there was a negotiation, it would have been finished in front of the stone house on the cliff plateau. She closed her eyes and seemed a little tired. Even though she heard the question, she still did not open her eyes. Qinshi stared at her and said in a hoarse voice, "Everyone knows Ning Ke wants to talk to the world. In fact, he just wants to talk to you. Yes, everyone knew that if Ning Ke wanted to talk to someone, the great divine priest of judgment would be one of them. The hierarch knew it. Zhao Nanhai knew it. The divine priests and deacons in the divine halls of West Hill, and even the servants knew it. That was why Xiong Chumo wanted the two Tangs to die in Qinghe Prefecture. That was why they could not meet Yi Hong Yu on Peach Mountain. At this moment, in front of thousands of divine priests and deacons, in front of countless powerhouses, they finally saw Yi Hong Yu. They wanted to talk to her, even if they would die in the next moment. Even if they had to die, they wanted her to hear what he had to say. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.